Nothingness as emptiness is not about the absence of things, but about the aching stillness that lies beneath all our frantic attempts to define ourselves. It is the soft but persistent echo behind every thought we chase, every identity we cling to, and every moment we try to hold still. Emptiness is not a void to be feared. It is the honest space where illusions fall away. It waits beneath your ambitions, your heartbreaks, your endless scrolling, your hurried mornings, your late-night regrets. It doesn't scream. It whispers, "You are not what you think you are." Nothingness as emptiness. In the silence of this philosophical nothingness, we are stripped of distractions, of meanings imposed by others, of narratives handed down through culture or trauma. What remains is not absence. It is raw potential, a space so still that it feels like the edge of the universe, and so intimate it feels like your own breath when you finally stop pretending. It's the unmasked moment when laughter dies down and you sit in the quiet, not knowing what comes next. But in that not knowing, there is terrifying freedom. No labels, no promises, no structure to lean on, just the awareness of existence unfolding without your control. The self in this philosophy is not a fixed thing, but a passing moment, a ripple in a stream that forgets it was ever separate from the water. Nothingness as emptiness teaches that peace isn't found by filling the silence. It's found by surrendering to it. The more you resist it, the louder your life must shout. But when you stop, even for a second, the emptiness cradles you, utterly alone, completely seen. Creative fidelity. Creative fidelity is the act of remaining loyal, not by staying the same, but by constantly reinventing the relationship between self and other. It is not static devotion nor blind repetition. It is love, presence, and commitment that evolve without breaking. In a world where certainty decays and promises collapse under the weight of time, creative fidelity is a rebellion against entropy. It says, "I will stay, not by clinging to what was, but by becoming who I need to be, for you, for us, for meaning itself." It is what happens when the initial spark fades and we must choose to love again, not out of nostalgia, but out of conscious re-engagement. It's what remains when the honeymoon ends and the masks come off and you see the mess of another soul. It's waking up beside someone you no longer idealize and choosing still to reach for their hand. Fidelity becomes creation, an ongoing act of building a bridge over the chasm of change. Creative fidelity is not limited to romance. It lives in friendship, in faith, in the artist's devotion to a vision that constantly escapes them. It is showing up for your work even when inspiration dies. It is continuing the conversation even when understanding seems impossible. It is what makes promises real, not because they are rigid, but because they are lived through every transformation. To be creatively faithful is to say, "I know you will change, and so will I, but I will meet you there, again and again, reshaping what loyalty means as we unfold." Athens versus Jerusalem. Athens versus Jerusalem is the ancient and eternal collision between reason and revelation, between the mind's longing for clarity and the soul's hunger for meaning. Athens stands for philosophy, the pursuit of truth through logic, questioning, doubt. It is the voice that says, "I will believe only what I can understand." Jerusalem, in contrast, stands for faith, a trust in something beyond comprehension, a surrender to mystery, to the divine whisper that says, "You do not need to understand to believe." This conflict is not merely historical, it lives inside us. It's the split within a sleepless mind debating whether to trust its pain or its prayers. It's the war between what you can prove and what you feel in your bones when no one's watching. Athens demands evidence. Jerusalem offers grace. Athens says, "Think." Jerusalem says, "Kneel." And the human soul trembles between them. You feel it when your logic tells you the world is cold and indifferent, but your heart still aches for justice, for mercy, for for something sacred. You feel it when you bury someone you love, and philosophy offers systems, but not comfort, while faith offers comfort, but not explanation. It is not a choice between illusion and truth. It is the impossibility of choosing at all. To live is to be torn by these two cities, to stand at their gates and feel your chest pulled in both directions. One urges you to doubt everything, the other dares you to believe anyway. And in that tension, in that unsolvable paradox, you become something entirely human. Tragic sense of life. The tragic sense of life is the quiet realization that everything you love will vanish, and loving it anyway. It is the ache that lives beneath joy, the tear behind the laughter, the haunting knowledge that to exist is to eventually lose. It isn't depression or despair. It's a deep, unshakable tenderness for what is doomed. It's watching your child sleep and knowing one day they'll suffer. It's saying, I love you, while the clock ticks louder than your heartbeat. This philosophy does not offer comfort. It offers clarity. It tells you, you are not immortal, and neither is anything you build. Your memories will fade. Your name will be forgotten. The sun will burn out. And yet, here you are, reaching for meaning like a flower, opening toward a dying sky. The tragic sense of life is not about giving up. It is about choosing to live with your eyes wide open. You keep showing up, keep loving, keep trying, not because it will last, but because it won't. There is a sacredness in transience. A kiss is more precious because it ends. A word matters more because it can't be taken back. To carry this sense is to walk through the world with a bruised soul and an open heart. It makes you gentle. It makes you brave. You no longer seek to escape suffering. You seek to honor it, because within the tragic lies the beautiful, not despite its ending, but because of it. What breaks your heart is also what proves it exists. Anxiety of choice. The anxiety of choice is the torment of infinite paths in a world without signs. It is the weight that falls on you the moment you realize no one is coming to tell you who to be. There is no voice from the sky, no script to follow, no universal rule book. There is only you standing at the crossroads, drowning in freedom. Every choice is a cut, one reality chosen, 1,000 others killed. We are not paralyzed by options because they are too few, but because they are too many. Every decision, from the smallest to the most defining, echoes into the unknown. The partner you choose, the job you accept, the words you say and don't say, they shape the contours of your being. You cannot avoid this. To delay is to choose. To not decide is to decide. This philosophy is not about right or wrong choices. It's about the unbearable responsibility of making them without guarantees. You search for signs, for assurance, but none comes. You long to rewind time, to see what might have been. You live haunted by ghosts of unlived lives, the what-ifs, the silent echoes of doors you never opened. And yet, choice is what makes you real. It is what pulls you from the abstract into flesh. In choosing, you give birth to a self, not a perfect one, but a living one. You are not simply what happens to you. You are what you choose, again and again, with trembling hands and a heart full of doubt. And that is terrifying, and that is beautiful. The unique and its property. The unique and its property is the radical idea that you belong to no one, not to God, not to society, not even to the ideals you once worshipped. You are not a cog in a grand machine. You are not a role or a label or a member of any sacred whole. You are a burning, breathing singularity, a one-time eruption of will, desire, and chaos. You are not meant to conform. You are meant to claim. This philosophy tears off the mask of collective identity and hands you something terrifying: absolute ownership of yourself, not just your body, but your thoughts, your values, your truth. Nothing is inherited, nothing is owed. Even your morality must be forged, not adopted. and everything you create, your words, your passions, your relationships, is yours, not gifts, not borrowed, yours. It is an explosive freedom, but it is also a lonely one, because once you accept your uniqueness, no one can save you. You cannot hide behind tradition. You cannot blame your actions on others. You cannot dissolve into the comfort of groupthink. You must become the author of your own meaning, and that means breaking the rules, even the ones that feel holy. The unique and its property dares you to speak with a voice unfiltered, to walk with a spine unbent, to love without surrender. It tells you to devour the world, not greedily, but authentically, to make it yours by living without apology. It's not about selfishness, it's about self-sovereignty. The only throne you are meant to sit on is the one you build from the bones of everything that tried to own you. Tears and saints. Tears and saints are the sacred collision of suffering and transcendence, the moments when human anguish becomes so deep, so raw, that it crosses into the divine. In this philosophy, tears are not a weakness. They are holy. They are offerings, not to others, not to yourself, but to something beyond language, something that watches, silently, as we break open again and again, just to feel real. There are tears of despair, yes, but also of longing, of yearning for purity in a world that stains everything. Saints are not flawless beings of light. They are wounded souls who weep in secret, who carry unbearable burdens, not because they must, but because they choose to. They are the ones who touch the suffering of the world and don't look away. Their sainthood is not in perfection, but in their refusal to become numb. This philosophy sees every tear as a form of prayer, a collapse that lifts you higher. Saints are born not in triumph, but in torment, in solitude, in silence, in the depth of nights where faith burns low and hope flickers like the last candle before dawn. It is in that trembling moment when nothing makes sense and you kneel anyway that sanctity begins. Tears are the body's confession. They say what words never can. And in this vision, each one is gathered, not lost, not meaningless. Suffering becomes a bridge. Pain becomes communion. You cry not because you are weak, but because some part of your soul remembers what purity feels like and grieves its absence with reverence. Pure experience. Pure experience is the raw, unfiltered moment before thought, before judgment, before language cages the world in names. It is the world as it is, not as you describe it, define it, or try to make sense of it. It is the shiver in your spine when wind touches your skin, the color red before you call it red, the feeling of time stretching when you're completely present. It is life before the mind breaks it into pieces. Most people never live there. They walk through the world covered in mental layers, reacting to memory, expectation, or fear, not to reality itself. Pure experience asks you to strip all that away, to see with eyes that don't categorize, to listen without waiting to respond, to feel without narrating the feeling. It's not mystical. It's not complicated. It's what a child does before they're taught what things mean. But for the adult mind, it's terrifying, because without labels, who are you? Without identity, without belief, without opinion, what remains? Just awareness, just the present moment humming in your chest like a quiet miracle. It's not found in ideas. It's found in silence, in sensation, in the split second where you forget to think and simply are. In pure experience, the world is not divided into self and other, subject and object. There is no watcher and no watched. There is just this, a breath, a flicker, a presence. It doesn't last. It's gone the moment you name it. But in that brief dissolving of the self, there is something unspeakably real, something truer than truth. The last Messiah. The last Messiah is the one who awakens, not to salvation, but to the unbearable clarity of human consciousness. He is not a redeemer in the traditional sense. He doesn't come to rescue humanity, but to mourn it. His awakening is not a revelation of divine order, but a confrontation with a terrifying truth, that to be human is to be cursed with the knowledge of our own mortality, futility, and suffering. This Messiah sees what most spend their lives trying to forget, that we are the only species aware of our own end, that our joy is temporary, our purpose invented, and our world drenched in avoidable pain. And in that vision, he feels not righteous anger, but deep, suffocating compassion. He does not cry for himself, he weeps for all of us, for every birth condemned to die, for every child destined to one day ask, why? To follow this Messiah is not to gain hope. It is to feel the weight of existence without flinching. It is to know that consciousness was perhaps a mistake, a beautiful, horrifying mistake. The last Messiah preaches no gospel, only silence. He calls not for faith, but for rest, a rest from the endless striving, the illusions we cling to, the cycles we repeat. He is the one who says, let the world sleep, let it forget itself, let it dissolve into peace, not through violence, not through despair, but through understanding so deep it breaks desire itself. He does not want to save us. He wants to set us free from ourselves. Presence of the eternal is the quiet hum beneath the noise of time, the sense that there is something in you that does not age, does not rush, does not fear endings. It is not about forever in the way clocks measure, but about the stillness that lives underneath every passing second. It's the breath behind your breath, the moment you close your eyes and feel, even for a heartbeat, that there is more to you than your story. You touch it in moments of awe, a mountain silhouetted at dusk, the gaze of someone who sees you without expectation, the silence in a church long after everyone has left. It is the part of you that doesn't care about achievement or reputation, the part that stays when everything else is stripped away. You don't earn it, you remember it. It has been waiting beneath your distractions, buried under your ambitions, always patient. This presence doesn't shout, it doesn't persuade, it simply is. You feel it when time slows down and nothing needs to happen, when the need to impress vanishes, and you simply sit with what is. It asks for no performance. It does not measure your worth. It is your worth, and it cannot be lost, because it was never separate from you. Most people are terrified of silence because they're afraid they won't find anything there. But in that silence, beneath the ache and the thoughts and the fear, lives the eternal, still, unchanging. It's not in the past or the future, it's now, and it's yours. Solitary thoughts. Solitary thoughts are the echoes that emerge when the world finally stops speaking to you. They rise in the hush between conversations, in the shadowed corners of empty rooms, in the long hours of a night that refuses to end. These thoughts are not born from noise, but from the unbearable stillness of self-awareness. When the masks fall, the laughter fades, and you're left alone with the truth of your own existence. They are not casual musings or passing ideas. They are raw and unfiltered, crawling out from the places you keep hidden, even from yourself. They whisper things you try not to know, that you are, in the end, separate, that no matter how close someone gets, there is a silence inside you that is yours alone, that your dreams, your doubts, your private longings, they live and die in the chambers of a mind no one else can truly enter. Yet within that solitude, something sacred stirs. These thoughts are not meant to be shared. They are the soil in which identity roots itself. They are where you ask questions too dangerous for daylight. What if I am not who I pretend to be? What if none of this matters? What if the person I show the world is just a fragile construction built to survive? In these moments, clarity glints like a knife. You meet yourself, without performance, without escape, and though terrifying, there is strange beauty here, a beauty in facing the solitude, not as punishment, but as proof that you are real, that you are thinking, that you are alive. Metaphysical biology is the unsettling realization that your body is not just flesh and blood, It is mystery made physical, a bridge between matter and meaning. Every cell, every heartbeat, every shiver under your skin is part of a larger riddle. Why does life feel like something? Why should molecules produce desire, memory, sorrow? You are not a machine. You are a question wrapped in skin. This philosophy whispers that biology isn't just science, it's poetry disguised as function. It challenges the cold lens that sees you as a bundle of neurons firing in predictable ways. It asks, how does a chemical pulse become a thought of someone you lost 10 years ago? Why does the scent of a stranger trigger an emotion you can't name? Why does the body remember what the mind forgets? Metaphysical biology doesn't stop at explanation. It aches for meaning. It looks at the body not as a cage for the soul, but as the soul's language. Your bones are not accidental. Your heartbeat is not a coincidence. Every tear you've shed is a sacred chemical. Every embrace is a metaphysical event. You are both map and terrain. You are stardust that feels. And in this perspective, your pain becomes sacred. Your hunger, your longing, your sickness, all of it speaks, not just in terms of cause and effect, but as symbols, as echoes of something deeper. Your biology is not beneath your spirituality. It is its expression. You are not a ghost trapped in a body. You are the body's dream of spirit, trembling toward meaning. Existence and the stars. Existence and the stars is the quiet ache that floods the soul when you look up at the night sky and feel, all at once, both infinite and invisible. It is the trembling awareness that you are suspended between cosmic vastness and the fragile brevity of your own life. The stars do not care if you suffer, if you dream, if you fall in love or disappear without a trace. They will burn long after your name is forgotten, long after your heartbeat stops. And yet, still, you look up. This philosophy is not comfort. It is not grandeur. It is the unbearable beauty of realizing how small you are and choosing to live anyway. You are a flicker of consciousness in an uncaring universe, a temporary knot of flesh and longing, drifting on a rock through endless dark. But somehow, against all reason, you love, you hope, you reach. Existence, in this light, becomes rebellion. Every act of kindness, every moment of joy, every whispered, "I'm here," in the face of silence, becomes sacred. You are not the center of anything, and somehow that makes you free. There are no divine blueprints etched in starlight, only your trembling will to create meaning where there is none. When you stare at the stars and feel that hollow awe expanding in your chest, you are touching a truth too large for language, that existence is precious because it is insignificant. The universe will not remember you, and still you choose to matter. That choice is the only thing the stars cannot explain. All things are possible. All things are possible is not a message of comfort. It is a scream from the edge of the abyss. It means there is no fixed order, no cosmic safety net, no final truth to anchor yourself in. What you call reality is not a law. It's a habit. The rules you follow, the meaning you assign, the identity you carry, they're scaffolding, not stone, and they can collapse at any moment. This philosophy begins where certainty ends. It tells you that logic can be undone, morality reversed, and everything you believe can be shattered by one unexpected moment. A saint can become a monster. A lie can become a religion. You can wake up one day and no longer recognize your own name. In this space, existence is not guided by reason. It is raw, unfiltered potential. To say all things are possible is to step into the terrifying freedom of chaos. It is the knowledge that no one is coming to save you, no system will ever fully hold you, and no story is ever final. It is the freedom to transform, to betray your former self, to become someone no one saw coming, even you. But this freedom has a cost. You can no longer pretend you know how the world works. You must live without ground. You must walk through life without a map. knowing that even gravity is a question mark. And yet, in that unanchored space, when everything is stripped away, you begin to feel it, the trembling thrill of becoming anything or nothing, because in the realm where all things are possible, so are you. Gravity and grace. Gravity and grace are the twin forces pulling the human soul in opposite directions, one dragging us down into the weight of existence, the other lifting us towards something we cannot name. Gravity is the pull of despair, the heaviness of ego, survival, suffering, repetition. It is everything that binds you to this world. Hunger, fear, ambition, shame. It is the slow erosion of your spirit under the pressure of being human. Grace, by contrast, is the impossible moment when, for no reason, the weight lifts. This philosophy does not deny suffering. It does not pretend life is fair. It looks directly at the hunger, the cruelty, the loneliness, and still dares to speak of grace. Grace is not earned. It arrives without warning, like light through a cracked door, a quiet sense that somehow you are forgiven, that despite everything, you are held. You feel gravity when you fail again, when you lash out, when you numb yourself just to get through the day. You feel it when your past clings like wet clothes, when hope feels embarrassing. But grace is when someone loves you after seeing everything. It's when you sit in silence and feel the world soften for a breath. It's when a stranger's kindness undoes your cynicism. It's not a reward, it's a miracle. We live pulled between these forces every day. One tells you you're broken, the other whispers you're beloved. Gravity is certainty. Grace is mystery, and somewhere in that tension, in the unbearable beauty of rising while still falling, you find your soul. The courage to be is not the absence of fear. It is choosing to exist despite it. It is waking up in a world that offers no guarantees, no clear purpose, no promise of safety, and saying, I will live anyway. It is the quiet defiance of the soul that dares to affirm itself in the face of anxiety, meaninglessness, and despair. To be is not simple. It is an act of rebellion against the nothingness that constantly whispers, you don't matter. This courage doesn't shout. It doesn't need applause. It's the trembling voice that says, yes, while your chest is full of dread. It's the decision to keep breathing, even when hope feels distant. It is the sacred strength of those who carry their sorrow like a hidden flame, warming themselves with the fragile miracle of still being here. The world strips you bare. It exposes your smallness, your mortality, your unbearable aloneness. And yet, in the depth of that exposure, courage is born, not by escaping your weakness, but by standing inside it. The courage to be means refusing to vanish, refusing to let the absurdity of existence silence the quiet truth of your presence. You are not courageous because you have answers. You are courageous because you ask the questions and keep living without them, because you reach out to others even when you fear rejection, because you dare to speak your truth even when your voice cracks. The courage to be is not something you find. It is something you become, moment by trembling moment, as long as you refuse to disappear. Religion and nothingness. Religion and nothingness is the collision between our desperate longing for meaning and the infinite silence that answers back. It is the spiritual void at the center of modern life, the feeling that the gods have left, that the old symbols no longer breathe, that prayer no longer echoes. Yet even as temples crumble and doctrines rot under scrutiny, something inside us still kneels, still pleads, still reaches for the sacred, where there may be nothing at all. This philosophy does not deny religion. It watches it bleed. It sits beside the shattered altar and asks, with trembling honesty, what remains when belief dies? What remains when the rituals feel empty, when the heavens no longer speak, when you stare into the dark and hear only your own heartbeat? And the terrifying answer is, you do. Your awareness, your thirst, your ache for the infinite. Nothingness in this sense is not a void to be filled, but a space to be faced. It's the absence that refuses to lie. It strips you of illusions, of divine reward, of cosmic comfort. And yet, in that bareness, something sacred begins, not given from above, but born from within, a trembling reverence for existence itself, unguarded and unsaved. To embrace religion and nothingness is to walk without guarantees, to sing even when the sky stays silent. It's the courage to build altars out of silence, to pray not for answers, but for presence. And in that quiet, forsaken space, meaning is not found, it is created by you, by your longing, by your choice to believe in something, even if that something is nothing. Denial of death. The denial of death is the invisible engine behind nearly everything we do, our ambitions, our religions, our loves, our wars. It is the desperate attempt to escape the unbearable truth that one day you will be gone, not just gone from the room, but gone from the earth, from memory, from meaning. Your name will be forgotten, your story will fade, the world will go on without you, as if you never existed, and yet every heartbeat inside you screams no. We build monuments, chase immortality through success, art, children, legacies, all to silence the terrifying awareness of our finiteness. We hide death behind hospital curtains and polite euphemisms, pretending it only happens to the old, the sick, the unlucky. But it waits for everyone, and deep down, we know that knowledge bubbles up as anxiety, as obsession with control, as the need to be seen, to matter, to leave something behind. This denial isn't weakness, it's instinct, because to truly face death means confronting the absurdity of effort. Why love if it all ends? Why strive if the finish line is the grave? But within that terror lies a chance, not for escape, but for awakening. If you stop running from death, you begin to live differently, more honestly, more urgently. You begin to taste your days instead of counting them, to speak truths while you still can, to stop pretending you have forever. You can't conquer death, but you can stop letting it control you in disguise. And in that raw, unarmored place, life begins to feel unspeakably real. The self in crisis. The self in crisis is not merely confused, it is unraveling. It is the moment when everything you thought you were begins to fracture, and the person you've been carrying collapses under the weight of its own contradictions. This crisis doesn't come gently. It sneaks in through betrayal, grief, failure, through the moment when your reflection no longer recognizes you. You reach for your usual roles, titles, routines, and they dissolve like smoke in your hands. This is not a breakdown of identity. It is the brutal realization that identity was never solid to begin with. The self, so carefully constructed from childhood hopes, social approval, and the desire to be someone others will love, begins to fall apart. What's left is terrifying, a raw, wordless awareness, stripped of mass, unsure if anything underneath was ever real. And yet, in this disintegration, there is a dark mercy. Crisis is the cracking open of the false self, the persona built to survive, not to live. The pain comes not from losing who you are, but from facing how little of it was truly yours. It's not the end of the self. It's the invitation to rebuild without lying this time. The self in crisis feels like death because it is one, but not of life, of illusion. What emerges slowly, painfully, is something more honest, less polished, more awake. You will grieve who you were, even if that person was only a mask. But once you've stared into the void of yourself and lived, no one can own you again, not even your past. The end of the modern world. The end of the modern world is not an apocalypse of fire, but a quiet collapse of meaning. It is the moment you realize that progress doesn't satisfy, that technology cannot answer the ache in your soul, that speed and power have left us stranded in a world of dazzling surfaces and hollow cores. We were promised liberation, freedom through science, order through reason, comfort through innovation. But what we got was loneliness in the glow of 1,000 screens. The modern world taught us to stop believing in mystery. It replaced the sacred with the efficient, the eternal with the temporary. It asked us to trade being for having, to measure life in data points and deadlines, to reduce wonder to algorithms. And we did. We became productive. We became informed. And yet we lie awake at night with a gnawing question we no longer know how to name. Something has ended. Not time itself, but trust in the stories we used to tell. The story that history moves forward, that truth is objective, that the individual is sovereign, that we are the masters of nature, not its frightened children. In the ruins of this worldview, we face a terrifying silence because we dismantled the old myths without building new ones strong enough to hold us. The end of the modern world isn't out there, it's in us. It's the emptiness behind your achievements. It's the hunger that success won't feed. It's the slow dawning that more information does not mean more wisdom, and more control does not mean more peace. Something is dying, and something nameless is being born. Knight of Faith. The Knight of Faith walks alone through a world that doesn't understand him, not because he is arrogant, but because he lives by a silence too deep for words. He is not loud, not proud, not visibly holy. He blends in, he buys bread, he smiles, and yet beneath the ordinary, he carries something unspeakable, a faith that defies reason, logic, and even despair, a trust so wild it appears absurd. He is the one who surrenders everything, his dreams, his identity, his very self, not out of duty, but out of love, and then, impossibly, receives it all back, not because he demands it, but because he believed it could be returned, not in this world's terms, but in something deeper, stranger, divine. He holds no guarantees, only the leap. This kind of faith is not fragile. It is forged in agony. It is not naive. It has seen everything fall apart and still chooses to rise. While the world clings to what it can prove, the Knight of Faith releases everything and steps forward, trembling and steady, into the unknown. He does not deny the absurdity. He embraces it. He does not need to justify his belief. It just is. And though he appears ordinary, the storm inside him is sacred. He is the quiet miracle that walks beside you unnoticed. He knows the cost of faith is everything, and the reward is nothing you can name. But still, he believes, without reason, without proof, with everything at stake, and that belief becomes his strength, his wound, his crown. San Manuel Bueno, martyr. San Manuel Bueno, martyr, is the tragedy of a man who leads others to faith while secretly drowning in doubt. He is a priest, a symbol of comfort, a beacon of belief to his people, and yet, in the quiet corners of his soul, he no longer believes in the afterlife he preaches. His faith is not in heaven, but in the healing power of illusion. He lies to give others peace. He sacrifices his truth so that they may keep their hope. This is not hypocrisy. It is martyrdom of the most intimate kind, not the shedding of blood, but the surrender of one's deepest self in silence. San Manuel does not shout his despair. He carries it like a wound stitched shut with duty. He smiles while his spirit fractures. He baptizes, blesses, comforts, not out of conviction, but out of love so profound it destroys him. He believes that if people knew the truth, that there may be nothing after death, they would collapse. So he carries their hope for them like a priest holding a candle for those too afraid of the dark. And yet, every sermon burns him. Every whispered prayer is a reminder of the lie that keeps others alive. This philosophy is not about belief. It's about the unbearable cost of compassion, about the kind of quiet heroism no one applauds. It asks whether it is more noble to tell the truth and wound, or to lie and save. San Manuel dies not as a man of God, but as a man of love, torn apart by a truth too heavy for the world he's sworn to protect. The myth of Sisyphus. The myth of Sisyphus is not about punishment. It is about the unbearable poetry of persistence. Sisyphus, condemned by the gods to roll a boulder up a mountain for eternity, only to watch it tumble back down, is not a figure of despair. He is a mirror held up to every human being who wakes up each day to carry a weight they never chose, toward a summit that never stays. This myth is not fiction, it is our condition. The meaningless job, the aching heartbreak, the quiet nights spent wondering if it matters. We push our stone, through grief, through routine, through hope that flickers and fades, and we know it will fall again. And still, we push, not because we are fools, but because in that pushing, we declare our defiance. We do not run from the absurdity of life. We name it, face it, live it. The philosophy behind Sisyphus is brutal in its honesty. There is no promise of justice, no happy ending, no cosmic reward, and yet, the moment Sisyphus turns to walk back down the hill, knowing the weight that waits for him, he becomes free, because he chooses, because he owns the futility, because he makes meaning not from what the world gives, but from how he resists it. He smiles, not because the task changes, but because he does. His suffering becomes sacred through rebellion. His curse becomes a crown, and in that simple, ceaseless climb, he teaches us that even in a world without answers, we can still choose how to carry the stone. Being toward death. Being toward death is the quiet awakening that everything you do, everything you love, everything you are, exists beneath the shadow of a ticking clock. It is not a morbid fixation on dying, but a fierce and lucid way of living. To be toward death is to live with your mortality not hidden in the background, but pulsing in the front of your awareness. It's the moment you realize that death is not some distant event, but the horizon that gives shape to every moment. Most people flee this truth. They distract themselves, drown in busyness, numb their fears with noise and convenience. They live in denial, like life is a permanent rehearsal. But the one who turns to face death, honestly, directly, wakes up. Death becomes a mirror, and in that reflection, everything false burns away. This philosophy strips you of illusions. You stop postponing what matters. You stop lying to yourself about who you are. The job title, the social mask, the pride, the fear, they begin to feel weightless. And what remains is urgency, intensity, clarity. You begin to see people not as roles, but as mortal souls, just like you, holding on to moments that will never come again. Being toward death does not make you despair. It makes you real. It makes you cherish the sunrise, the tremble in a lover's voice, the feel of your own breath as something rare. You do not live forever, but you live now, and that is everything. Death is not your enemy. It is your witness. It is what makes your life yours. I am I and my circumstance. I am I and my circumstance is the quiet explosion of realizing you are not just a self, floating untouched above the world. You are shaped, pressed, wounded, and formed by everything around you. You are not a sealed identity. You are a dialogue, a tension, a fragile negotiation between the pulse of your inner life and the chaos of your outer one. This philosophy tears down the illusion of the isolated individual. It says, you are not just your thoughts, your desires, your intentions. You are also the city you were born in, the language you inherited, the grief in your parents' bones, the walls that surround your days. You are made of light and air and violence and history. You are what you choose, but you choose from a terrain not of your own making. When you fail, this truth crushes you. When you awaken, it sets you free, because it means you are not trapped in some fixed essence. You can change your circumstance, and by doing so, change yourself. You can rewrite the map. You can rebuild the room in which your soul breathes. This is not an excuse. It is a responsibility. To live as I and my circumstance is to carry both burden and possibility. It means that healing is not only inner. It means your freedom is not isolated. It is relational. and the self is no longer a static object, but a process unfolding in real time against the world that holds you. You are not alone. You are not everything. You are both. And the way forward lies in how you meet your circumstance and what you become in that meeting. Islands, islands is the haunting realization that each of us lives surrounded by an ocean no one else can cross. We long for connection, crave closeness, beg to be understood, but always with the aching knowledge that no one will ever fully reach us. We are islands, tethered by glimpses, by shared language, by fleeting touches, but the inner landscape remains untouched, unseen, unknowable. You can lie next to someone for decades and still feel the tide between you. This philosophy is not loneliness, it's awareness, a clear-eyed gaze at the impossibility of total understanding. Even in your most vulnerable confessions, something is lost in translation. Even when you scream your truth, what reaches the other shore is never exactly what you meant. The more you try to explain yourself, the more you realize how much of you lives in silence. But this isolation is not without beauty. It is what makes connection so sacred. Every moment of being seen, even partially, is a miracle. Every gesture of tenderness across the void becomes an act of courage. To reach out, knowing you may never truly be met, is what makes the effort holy. To love, even when the other remains a mystery, is what makes love real. We are islands, yes, but not still ones. We send out signals, we light fires, we build bridges, even as the tide threatens to swallow them. And in those brief crossings, where one soul touches the edge of another, we find not resolution, but something better, the exquisite ache of being almost known. Heretical essays. Heretical essays are the thoughts that whisper when the cathedral is silent, when the rituals feel hollow, and the sacred truths begin to crack. They are not blasphemy for the sake of rebellion. They are the trembling questions of a soul that can no longer pretend. These essays are not written in ink. They are carved into the bones of anyone who has dared to doubt what they were told they must never question. To be heretical in this sense is to seek truth so fiercely that you're willing to risk everything for it. Your comfort, your belonging, your sense of certainty. It is to stand in the ruins of tradition and ask, what still breathes here? It is not about destroying the past. It is about sifting through it, mourning what was lost, and refusing to inherit dead meaning just because it was passed down. This philosophy sees history not as a monument, but as a battlefield, a place where human beings have fought to understand their existence, and too often settled for easy answers in the name of peace. Heretical thought dares to disturb that peace, not with arrogance, but with longing for something real, something alive. To write or live heretically is to tear at the fabric of what you've outgrown, not to leave it in ashes, but to find the thread of truth still hidden within. These essays do not scream, they ache. They do not destroy faith, they purify it through fire. They are dangerous not because they lie, but because they insist on asking, what if the truth is harder and more beautiful than we ever imagined? Ethics as first philosophy. Ethics as first philosophy is the radical, unsettling claim that responsibility to the other comes before knowledge, before selfhood, before even the question of being. It means that before you ask, who am I, or what is true, you are already standing face to face with another human being who looks at you, vulnerable, needing. You are already implicated, already called. There is no neutral ground, no outside observer. The moment you encounter the other, you are no longer alone, and you are no longer innocent. This philosophy does not begin in the mind, but in the face of someone else, a face that disrupts you, a face that says, you cannot walk away untouched. It is the gaze of a child asking for safety, the trembling eyes of a stranger in pain. It is the silent plea in the look of someone you've hurt, whether you meant to or not. You do not choose this responsibility. It chooses you, Ethics here is not about rules or systems. It is about presence. It is about staying when it would be easier to turn away. It is the terror of knowing that you have power to harm, and the grace of choosing not to. It is the quiet demand not to explain the world, but to care for it. You are not first a thinker, or a citizen, or a self. You are first a witness, first a responder. The other is not your project. They are your test. And the question isn't, what do I owe them? But, what happens to me if I pretend I don't? Philosophy of redemption. The philosophy of redemption is not about being saved by someone else. It's about facing the unbearable truth of existence and still choosing to become more than your suffering. Redemption here is not granted. It is earned, agonizingly, through confrontation with darkness so thick it threatens to erase you. It begins in the pit, when you've lost your way, your identity, your will, and something inside you still whispers, "Rise." This is not a theology. It is not built on mercy or miracle. It is raw metaphysical rebellion. It tells you that life is drenched in pain, cruelty, and death, not as punishment, but as fact. You are born into a world that did not ask for you and will not bend for you, and still, you must choose. Choose whether to curse it or redeem it with your own bare hands. Redemption, in this light, is not the erasure of sin, but the transformation of it. It is the act of staring into the parts of yourself you want to kill, the memories that make you flinch, and instead of fleeing, you dig deeper. You gather what's broken and make something sacred from it. You say, "This happened, and I will make it mean something." The philosophy of redemption sees you not as fallen, but as rising. Again and again, each wound becomes a threshold, each shame a lesson. You are not healed by forgetting. You are redeemed by carrying the weight and still choosing to sing. It is the hardest path. It is the only path. And it begins the moment you stop running from your ruins and start building from them. Flesh of the world. Flesh of the world is the revelation that we are not minds trapped in bodies, nor souls watching the world from behind our eyes. We are the world, sensing itself. It is the soft undoing of the illusion that you are separate. You are not a spectator. You are a texture, a movement, a fold in the living fabric of existence. You touch and are touched. You see and are seen. You are not in the world. You are of it. This philosophy erases the boundary between subject and object. The tree you admire is not out there. The wind on your skin is not an external event. It is you. It is the same flesh, the same pulse of being, the same breath of time. There is no observer who stands outside reality. There is only intertwining. You are what the world feels like from one particular angle. In this vision, perception is communion. When you see the sunlight filtering through leaves, the light and the seeing happen together, like music and listening. There is no divide. You are not a ghost inhabiting matter. You are matter awakening to itself. To live with this awareness is to move through the world as part of a living symphony. You cannot touch without being touched. You cannot harm without being harmed. The flesh of the world holds everything: joy, grief, solitude, beauty, and it holds you too, not as an outsider, but as a note in its unending song. You are not a thing in the world. You are its heartbeat. The wager is not a bet for profit. It is a cry from a mind pushed to the edge of reason, standing at the abyss between belief and doubt, whispering, "I have to choose, even if I'll never know." It is the moment when logic exhausts itself, when the questions don't end but circle back, maddening, and you are forced to gamble not with coins, but with your life. The wager does not ask what is true. It asks what you are willing to live as if were true. You cannot escape the gamble. Silence is a choice. Doubt is a choice. Faith is a choice. Whether you kneel in prayer or scoff in defiance, you've already placed your bet. The coin is your soul. The stakes are eternity or nothing at all. But the wager is not about fear of hell or hope of heaven. It is about this moment, right now, and what you decide matters most. If you choose to live as if the sacred exists, you live with reverence, with meaning, with surrender. If you choose otherwise, you live with defiance, with self-constructed meaning, with uncertainty. Both paths are haunted, neither is safe. This philosophy doesn't try to prove God. It exposes the unbearable tension of being human in a world that stays silent. You want answers, but are given only questions and the freedom to decide what they mean. The wager is not about belief, it's about commitment. You leap, not knowing what waits, and that leap, that trembling risk, becomes your most honest act. You are always betting. The only question is, on what? Mystery and problem. Mystery and problem are not the same. A problem is something to be solved, an obstacle with a solution, a formula, an answer waiting to be uncovered through logic or force. But a mystery is something else entirely. It is not meant to be conquered. It is meant to be entered, lived, endured. It does not ask for your intellect. It asks for your surrender. In this philosophy, problems belong to science, to systems, to the outer world. They are mechanical, detached. You fix a broken machine, decode a language, untangle a puzzle. But mystery is the trembling weight of existence itself. It is the question that deepens the more you ask. Love is a mystery. Suffering is a mystery. Consciousness, why you are aware at all, is not a riddle to be cracked, but a presence to be met. The mistake we make again and again is trying to turn mysteries into problems. We reduce the human soul to brain chemistry, grief to statistics, beauty to symmetry. We measure what should be felt. We dissect what should be reverenced. And in doing so, we lose something vital, something sacred. To live well is not to eliminate all mystery, but to allow it space inside you. To look at another human being not as a system to analyze, but as a horizon you will never reach. To let questions stay open. To let wonder be enough. Some things are not meant to be solved. They are meant to break you open, and in that breaking, make you more whole than certainty ever could. The outsider is the one who walks among others, but is not of them. He watches the world through a pane of invisible glass, present but apart. At a dinner table, in a classroom, at a funeral or a celebration, he feels what no one else seems to say, that something isn't right, that underneath the surface of routine and politeness and small talk lies a kind of quiet horror, an emptiness dressed in normalcy. The outsider does not choose his exile. It arrives like a slow realization, a slow death of illusion. He looks around and wonders how others do it, how they believe, how they belong, how they sleep. He tries to join in. He wears the mask, but it slips again and again, and behind it is a mind too awake, too sensitive, too fractured to forget that existence is strange and fragile and terrifying. This philosophy is not about rebellion. It is about alienation, a metaphysical loneliness that seeps into every conversation, every smile, every failed attempt to feel real. The outsider lives with questions others have learned to silence. He carries the weight of consciousness without sedation. But this exile is not without power. From the outside he sees the absurdity, the contradictions, the quiet despair everyone works so hard to cover. And in that seeing, there is a bitter kind of clarity, a freedom paid for in suffering. To be the outsider is to walk the world as a ghost among the living, cursed with awareness. But maybe, just maybe, touched by truth no one else dares to face. Without guilt and justice. Without guilt and justice is the harrowing glimpse of a world where morality has lost its gravity, where right and wrong no longer carry weight, and suffering goes unanswered, not by cruelty, but by indifference. It is not a world of monsters. It is a world of silence, a world where atrocities do not echo, where the cry for accountability dissolves into air. It is the nightmare of moral numbness, a place where guilt does not pierce and justice never arrives. This philosophy stares into the hollow aftermath of modernity, where meaning has been dismantled by analysis, and the language of ethics is spoken like ritual without fire. Guilt becomes performance, justice becomes paperwork. No one feels, no one listens. The soul collapses into systems that no longer believe in soul. But the terrifying part isn't the absence of law, it's the absence of remorse. The world without guilt is not a world where people stop doing harm. It's a world where they no longer flinch, where the face of the victim is met with apathy, with technicalities, with "it's not my fault," where people walk away from devastation untouched because they have forgotten how to tremble. And without guilt, justice dies too, not in a grand collapse, but in quiet erosion. Justice cannot exist without the human heart recognizing pain that is not its own. This is the true horror, not that people do evil, but that they do it with clean hands and quiet sleep. When guilt is gone and justice is mechanical, all that remains is survival. And that is not life. It is cold endurance masquerading as order. Shipwreck of existence. The shipwreck of existence is the moment you realize the vessel you were promised would carry you, your beliefs, your plans, yourself, has splintered beyond repair. You wake up one morning and the sea is no longer calm. The compass spins without direction, and the map you were given means nothing. You are not on a journey. You are wreckage, floating in waters too deep to measure. This is not a metaphor. It is what happens when your illusions die, when the God you trusted is silent, when love doesn't save you, when the future you clung to burns down in your hands. The shipwreck comes not with violence, but with stillness, a deep, echoing silence that wraps around your chest and whispers, "There is no ground beneath you. There never was." But here's the truth this philosophy dares to say: the shipwreck is not your end, it is your beginning, because only when the false vessel is destroyed can you confront the ocean itself. Only then can you feel the terrifying depth of your own freedom. No more maps, no more anchors, just you and the infinite. The shipwreck doesn't offer comfort. It offers revelation that you are alone, yes, but also alive, that your salvation won't come from a shore someone else built, but from the way you learn to float, or to swim, or to dive into the unknown without guarantees. It's in this drowning, this unbearable suspension, that something begins to awaken, something stronger than certainty, something more honest than hope, something like courage, something like truth. The ethics of ambiguity. The ethics of ambiguity is the unflinching acceptance that life does not come with clear lines or final answers, and that morality must be forged not in certainty, but in chaos. It is the understanding that to be human is to be thrown into a world without guarantees, without divine commands, without absolute truths. And yet, despite that terrifying freedom, you must choose, you must act, you must create value where none is given. This philosophy begins not in power, but in vulnerability. You are free, but so is everyone else. And that freedom collides. It hurts. You do not live in a vacuum. Every choice you make creates ripples in the lives of others. And so you bear responsibility not just for what you do, but for what you allow. But the path forward is not mapped. There are no formulas, no commandments whispered from the sky. There is only this moment, your conscience, and the weight of knowing that no decision is ever pure. Ambiguity is not an excuse. It is a burden. It is the grief of never being completely right, the courage of acting anyway, and the humility of knowing you may be wrong. You love in ambiguity. You fight in ambiguity. You live in the fog and make meaning with hands that shake. To embrace this ethic is to resist comfort, to stop pretending that simplicity will save you. It is to meet life not with answers, but with presence, with responsibility, with trembling defiance, and to say again and again, Even without certainty, I will still try to do what is right. Star of Redemption. The star of redemption is not a fixed light in the sky. It is the faint glow that flickers between despair and hope, between the ruins of history and the ache for wholeness. It is not the promise of salvation handed down from above, but a fragile structure built across the abyss, one thread at a time, by a soul refusing to give up on meaning. In a world torn apart by violence, exile, and silence, this star dares to say that healing is still possible, but never simple. This philosophy is born from the wound of separation, separation between self and other, between God and the world, between life and death, between time and eternity. It does not hide from the pain of being cast out, of not belonging, of bearing a shattered past that cannot be undone. And yet, from within this fracture, it reaches for connection, not erasure, not fusion, but relation. The star of redemption is not a return, it is a reconstruction. It does not erase suffering, it dares to weave it into the fabric of a new beginning. Every scar becomes a thread, every question a path. You do not ascend to it, you rise slowly, painfully, toward it, through love, through responsibility, through a fierce, unrelenting refusal to let the world remain broken. It is a philosophy of tension between the world as it is and the world as it could be, between exile and return, between despair and a sacred longing that refuses to die. It is the light that does not blind, but guides, not from above, but from within. Zibaldone is the chaotic inner archive of a restless mind, fragmented, unfinished, and utterly alive. It is not a system, not a doctrine, not even a philosophy in the conventional sense. It is the refusal to force order where there is none. It is the soul laid bare in scraps, sudden insights, melancholy reflections, contradictions that do not ask to be resolved. It is thought as it truly is, messy, haunted, uncertain, a private journal of a consciousness at war with itself. This philosophy does not pretend to offer clarity. It offers intimacy. You read it not to learn, but to feel less alone in your own mental noise. Every note, every passage is a man grappling with the unbearable beauty and absurdity of existence, the boredom of life, the illusion of progress, the weight of memory, the quiet terror of time passing too fast to grasp. Zibaldone is a cry against the polished surface of modern thought. It shows the cracks, the doubts, the nights when even the stars seem too far away to matter. It reveals the philosopher not as a figure of wisdom, but as a human being, aching, uncertain, often undone. In this scattered form, there is an honesty deeper than certainty. It is a mirror for anyone who's ever stared at the ceiling at 2 a.m., swimming in thoughts too dense to name. It says, you don't need to make perfect sense to be real. You don't need to finish the thought for it to matter. Let the fragments speak. Let your chaos breathe. There's meaning there, even if it never fully arrives. On the heights of despair, you do not find answers. You find exposure. The skin is peeled back, the soul unguarded. This is not ordinary sadness. It is not melancholy wrapped in poetry. It is the raw scream of a consciousness that can no longer be soothed by illusion. It is standing at the edge of your own mind and realizing there is no solid ground, only the sharp, bright terror of being aware. Here, even beauty hurts. The sunset reminds you that everything dies. Laughter tastes like betrayal. Love feels like a promise you know will break. The world continues, unbothered, while inside you, everything is collapsing. And yet, the collapse is honest. Despair in this philosophy is not a malfunction. It is a moment of unfiltered truth, the death of lies, the failure of comfort, the place where your soul meets its own naked reflection. There is no comfort offered here, no redemption arc, but there is clarity, and clarity is a strange kind of salvation. On the heights of despair, you are not distracted. You are not sedated. You are finally awake. And yes, it is unbearable, but it is real. To reach these heights is to live with the kind of intensity that burns the edges of your sanity, but it also means you feel more deeply than others dare to. Even joy, when it returns, is sharper, stranger, more alive, because you have seen the abyss and it did not kill you. It simply made you more honest and more human. Messianic time is not a point on the calendar. It is the moment when ordinary time ruptures, when the expected order of the world collapses, and something impossible begins to shimmer just beneath the surface of now. It is the heartbeat of revolution, the breath held between despair and deliverance, the whisper that says, "What is does not have to be what will be." It is not the arrival of a savior. It is the unbearable waiting for a world that still aches to be saved. This philosophy does not move in straight lines. It does not trust clocks or schedules or the slow violence of so-called progress. It believes in interruption, in the sudden flash of meaning in a meaningless hour, in the sacred charge of an ordinary moment that reveals itself as holy, not because it was predicted, but because it broke through. Messianic time is not passive. It is the fierce alertness that something is always possible, even when nothing seems to move. It lives in the tension between what is and what could be, what has failed and what might still rise. It's the moment when the silence in a crowd becomes more powerful than the speech, when the smallest act of resistance becomes a doorway to the infinite. It is the time of the outsider, the exile, the forgotten, the ones who carry in their wounds the seeds of a world not yet born. It is a time that does not unfold, but erupts. And when it does not ask for permission. It asks, "Are you awake? Are you ready to step through the crack in the present?" Aesthetic monism. Aesthetic monism is the belief that beauty is not a decoration of truth. It is truth. That behind every system, every philosophy, every attempt to explain the world lies one unshakable foundation, the aesthetic, not as luxury, not as escape, but as the primal force that shapes how we perceive, how we feel, how we know. Before we reason, before we speak, before we believe, we are moved by color, by form, by rhythm, by silence. This philosophy insists that beauty is not a mask for meaning, it is its origin. We do not find the world logical and then make it beautiful. We find it beautiful, and that beauty allows us to bear its chaos. To walk through life with this understanding is to realize that the sacred is not confined to religion, nor truth to logic. The sacred is in a single brushstroke, the shiver of a note, the curve of a shadow on skin. Aesthetic monism sees unity beneath contradiction. It suggests that all the fragments of experience, love and grief, thought and flesh, ecstasy and pain, can be reconciled not through reason, but through form. The universe doesn't need to explain itself if it can make you weep through a poem. Your life doesn't need to make sense if it moves like a symphony. It is not about prettiness. It is about resonance. When something beautiful wounds you, or heals you, or stops your breath, it's not because it's nice. It's because it reminds you, deeply and wordlessly, that everything is connected, and you are part of it. The hour of the star. The hour of the star is the moment when an invisible life flickers into visibility, briefly, painfully, like a final breath caught in light. It is the hour when someone who was never seen, never loved, never chosen, is suddenly noticed, and then just as quickly, forgotten again. This philosophy does not speak of grandeur. It speaks of smallness, of the fragile, flickering souls who live on the margins of existence, whose suffering is so ordinary it becomes invisible. It is the hour of the girl who walks home in silence, who doesn't know she's poor because she doesn't know anything else. The hour of those who carry loneliness like second skin, too tired to be angry, too alive to disappear. It is the sacred tragedy of a life so quiet it nearly doesn't count, until, for one brief hour, it does. The hour of the star does not shine with power. It shines with exposure. It is the hour in which the world's cruelty is laid bare, not with drama, but with unbearable simplicity. It's when the truth slips out from beneath language, that dignity is not tied to status, that beauty doesn't need to be seen to exist, that a life can be shattered without ever being noticed. This philosophy stares directly into the face of forgotten humanity and dares to call it sacred. It does not glorify suffering. It reveals it in the hope, no, the demand that we do not look away, that we hold the gaze, that we remember the star even after it disappears. The divided self. The divided self is the quiet war waged within you, the clash between the person you are and the one you pretend to be. It is the unbearable tension of carrying multiple versions of yourself, the one who smiles at strangers, the one who screams in silence, the one who obeys, the one who aches to escape. You live as a performance, even in front of yourself, and somewhere deep down, something cracks. This philosophy does not pathologize the split. It recognizes it as essential. To be human is to be torn. You are not one self. You are many, constantly negotiating, compromising, lying, reaching. There is the part of you that seeks belonging, and the part that longs to disappear, the part that conforms, and the part that wants to burn it all down. These selves do not cancel each other. They coexist, uneasily. The divided self is not weakness. It is awareness. To feel the split is to see how much of your life is shaped by fear, fear of rejection, of abandonment, of being seen and not loved. So you divide, you become acceptable, you shrink, you wear masks so long you forget what your face looks like underneath. But in the cracks of division, something real begins to stir, the longing to unify, not to erase the parts of you, but to hold them all without shame, to let the screaming child and the smiling adult sit beside each other, to be whole not by being consistent, but by being honest. You are not broken because you are divided. You are divided because you are alive, and the healing begins the moment you stop pretending otherwise. Existential solipsism. Existential solipsism is the terrifying possibility that you are the only consciousness that exists, that every face you've loved, every voice you've heard, every hand you've held might be a projection of your own mind. It is not the cold hypothesis of abstract philosophers. It is a psychological storm, a quiet horror that settles in the chest when you ask, what if none of this is real but me? This philosophy is not loneliness. It is isolation raised to the level of metaphysical panic. It is the collapse of the shared world. The walls don't close in, they vanish. Others speak, but you begin to doubt they feel. You laugh, but wonder if it echoes into a void. The familiar becomes unreal. The tender becomes hollow. You touch someone and feel not connection, but the unbearable suspicion that you are touching yourself in disguise. And yet, this is not madness. It is the far end of consciousness, where the desire for certainty collides with the limits of perception. You cannot crawl into another's mind. You cannot prove their sorrow or joy. You only know your own, and even that flickers. But in that flickering, something brutal and profound emerges: responsibility. If the world is your projection, then so is its cruelty, so is its beauty. The pain you see might be yours to relieve. The joy you create might be the only kind that exists. Existential solipsism is not meant to be resolved. It is meant to wake you, to force you to ask again and again whether love means more or less if you're the only one here to feel it. Bare life. Bare life is the condition of existing without protection, without dignity, without the veil of rights or recognition, the raw, stripped state of being alive but unseen. It is life reduced to biology, to breath and blood and vulnerability, without the shield of law, culture, or value. In this philosophy, to be human is not enough. You must be included in the order that deems you worth something, and if that order decides otherwise, you become bare. This is the life of the refugee with no nation, the prisoner with no trial, the outcast whose suffering is not recorded. It is the worker whose death is a number, the child born into war, the woman whose pain is met with silence. Bare life is the horror of being expendable, not just killed, but erased, uncounted, unnamed. This philosophy doesn't romanticize the human. It reveals how fragile the human condition truly is, how quickly it can be taken away, how close we all are to being forgotten, denied, made invisible by systems too vast to touch. You may think you are safe, but the border, the courtroom, the crisis, these can decide otherwise, and in an instant you are only flesh. But bare life is not only tragedy, it is also a kind of mirror. It reflects what the world chooses not to see. It exposes the lies we tell about justice, belonging, and worth. And in that exposure, it asks a brutal question. Who do we protect, and who do we abandon? To see bare life is to see the cost of silence, and to feel the haunting possibility that one day it could be you. Smothered words. Smothered words are the truths we bury beneath silence, not because they are unimportant, but because they are too dangerous to speak. They live inside us like ghosts, unfinished sentences, swallowed confessions, screams turned inward. These words press against the walls of the soul, heavy with meaning, desperate to exist, but they remain hidden, out of fear, out of shame, out of survival. This philosophy is not about censorship from outside. It is about the self-censorship that carves holes in our identity. The moments when you wanted to say, I love you, but didn't. When you needed to say, I'm scared, but smiled instead. When you could have said stop, but froze. Every smothered word is a small death, a truth denied its breath. And yet, they do not disappear. They settle in the body, in the quiet between your thoughts, in the tension in your shoulders, in the dreams that leave you shaken. They haunt conversations, distort intimacy, build walls where bridges might have been. You live surrounded by words you never spoke, and they shape you as much as the ones you did. To acknowledge them is terrifying, because it means facing all the times you chose silence over self. But it is also freeing, because smothered words, once spoken, become alive. They no longer control you from the dark. They breathe, they rupture, they heal. This philosophy asks, what have you never said? And what would happen if you did? Would the world end, or would it finally begin? The truth you're afraid of may not destroy you. It may be the only thing that can save you. The burnout society. The burnout society is not simply tired. It is exhausted in its very soul. It is not the fatigue of effort, but the collapse that comes after too much striving, too much optimizing, too much pretending. It is the quiet horror of a life that looks full on the outside and feels empty on the inside. A world where you're always connected but never truly held, where your worth is measured in output and rest feels like failure. This philosophy names what many feel but cannot say, that we are no longer oppressed by others. We are oppressed by ourselves. We hustle, not because someone forces us, but because we've internalized the command to always become more productive, more available, more attractive, more successful. Even rest must be efficient. Even pleasure must perform. The burnout society is addicted to achievement, but numb to meaning. You scroll endlessly, respond instantly, say yes automatically, and somewhere in that blur, you vanish. You become your schedule, your inbox, your curated self. You look in the mirror and see momentum, but not presence. This exhaustion is not weakness. It is a wound, a spiritual erosion masked as ambition. You are not lazy. You are overexposed. You are not bored. You are overstimulated. And the deepest ache is not for more, but for nothing, for silence, for stillness, for a single breath that doesn't demand anything from you. The burnout society doesn't collapse in fire, it dissolves in quiet resignation. And in that quiet, a question grows louder. What if doing less is not giving up, but beginning again? What if stopping is the most radical act left? Sovereignty of good. The sovereignty of good is not about rules or virtue. It is about the quiet, unshakable presence of something pure that exists beyond calculation. It is not what you should do or what you're told to do. It is what your soul whispers when no one's watching. This good is not enforced by law, not codified in doctrine. It is sovereign because it does not ask for permission. It simply is. This philosophy begins in the deep realization that goodness is not a function of outcome, that sometimes to do what is right is to lose, to be misunderstood, to be alone, and yet to do it anyway, not for applause, not even for peace, but because something within you cannot do otherwise. The sovereignty of good is the moment you act with no promise of reward, no certainty of being seen, no assurance that it will matter. And still, you reach out, you protect, you tell the truth. It's a trembling defiance in a world of systems that reward cruelty and numbness. It says, I will not become like them. It is not naive. It has seen evil. It has tasted betrayal, but it still chooses light, not because the light wins, but because it's the only thing worth choosing. This good has no throne, no crown. It often walks barefoot, unnoticed, but when it speaks, it cuts through illusion like wind through silence. The sovereignty of good reminds us, even when everything is broken, there is still a way to be, and it may not save the world, but it will save you from becoming what the world expects. The conspiracy against the human race. The conspiracy against the human race is not plotted in secret rooms. It's written in our biology, in our awareness, in the curse of consciousness itself. This philosophy whispers what most people spend their lives trying not to hear, that to be alive, to be self-aware, is to suffer, that birth is not a gift, it's a sentence, that we, unlike other creatures, know we will die, and spend every waking moment trying to forget it. It suggests that existence is not something to celebrate, but something to endure, that evolution handed us a brain too powerful for our own peace. We know too much, we feel too deeply, we imagine futures that don't exist and mourn losses before they happen. We fear, hope, remember, dread, all while trapped in flesh that decays in a world that cannot care. This is not pessimism, it is not angst, it is a brutal clarity, a willingness to see that the drive to keep going may be nothing more than biological inertia, that the stories we tell of progress, love, purpose might be distractions from a truth too vast and cold to face directly. And yet, we persist. We cling to joy. We build meaning from ruins, not because we've solved the horror, but because we refuse to collapse into it. The conspiracy isn't that someone is against us. It's that consciousness itself might be. And still, we write, we love, we ache. Perhaps the most human act isn't to celebrate life, but to live it, even after knowing what it really is. The book, On the Taboo Against Knowing Who You Are. The taboo against knowing who you are is not a rule written in law. It's a whisper passed through generations, a quiet conditioning that says, don't look too closely. Don't ask what you really are. Beneath the names, the roles, the thoughts, it tells you to identify with the mask, with the performance, with the voice in your head, but never with the awareness watching it all. This philosophy tears through that silence. It says the self you think you are, the ego, the story, the job title, the personality, is not the whole of you. It is a role being played, a costume worn by something deeper, vaster, unspeakable, and yet, somehow, intimately you. You are not separate from the universe. You are the universe, playing human for a little while, pretending to be small so it can experience wonder. But this knowing is taboo, because if you remember it, if you truly remember, it changes everything. The fear of death dissolves, The hunger for validation weakens. The structures of control lose their grip. You stop taking the drama seriously. You stop chasing the next identity. You start laughing, not out of cruelty, but from the joy of remembering you were never lost. And so we forget. We're taught to forget, because a society built on fear, on ego, on striving, cannot survive an awakened soul. To know who you are is to no longer be manipulated. It is to be free, not in theory, but in being. And that freedom is terrifying. And that freedom is the truth. False necessity. False necessity is the illusion that the way things are is the way they must be. It is the quiet lie whispered through institutions, ideologies, and traditions that our lives are shaped by forces too vast, too fixed, too sacred to question, that the system is natural, that history is inevitable, that suffering is the price of order. This philosophy dares to tear that lie open. It tells you that nothing is carved in stone, not your role, not your society, not the structures that claim to define you. The economy is not a law of nature. The hierarchy is not a divine plan. The path you were told to follow is not fate. It is design. And what is designed can be redesigned. False necessity thrives in resignation. When people say, "That's just how it is," they are not stating a fact. They are surrendering. They are calling a cage reality. This philosophy insists that reality is not neutral. It's shaped by choice, by power, by repetition. And we mistake what we've inherited for what is unchangeable. It's in the rules that make you shrink, in the expectations you never agreed to, in the traditions that wound you in the name of honor. You feel it when you want something more, but are told to be realistic. When you dream and are told to wake up. False necessity is the enemy of imagination, and to confront it is to awaken, not to chaos, but to possibility. Because once you realize the world was made, you realize it can be remade, and that truth is dangerous, and that truth is hope. Logic of Basho. The logic of Basho is not the logic of machines, it is the logic of presence. It does not divide the world into subject and object, thinker and thought, here and there. It says, all things arise within a field, and that field is not separate from you. Basho is not a place you stand in. It is the place that stands you. It is the grounding, the where of being, before you name it, before you grasp at it, before you think it into parts. This philosophy breaks open the rigid boxes of Western thought, the obsession with categories, hierarchies, binaries. It sees reality not as fragments stacked on top of each other, but as a living, breathing unity. Thought arises within experience, but experience is not subordinate to it. You do not observe the world from outside. You arise with it, in it, as it. The logic of Basho is the quiet refusal to separate. When you look at a tree, it is not you seeing it. It is sight arising between you. It is the moment in which self and world ripple through each other. It is the mountain that watches back. It is the breath that breathes you. In this space, contradiction dissolves, stillness and movement, silence and speech, inner and outer. None are at war. They are expressions of the same unfolding field. Basho is where all things belong without being forced to fit. It is not argument. It is realization. And once you glimpse it, you know you were never outside of the world. You were the world, forgetting its own name. Zen and the problem of consciousness. Zen and the problem of consciousness is the silent koan echoing through every breath. Who is the one that sees? Who is the one that thinks? It is not a question meant to be answered, but to dissolve you. This philosophy does not build systems. It shatters them. It does not solve consciousness. It exposes it as the very illusion that keeps you from waking up. In Zen, consciousness is not your ally. It is the veil, the constant narration, the voice in your head that won't shut up, the self that observes but never stops interfering. It is not your truth. It is your dream. and Zen strikes at it like a blade, not to destroy the mind, but to strip it of its tyranny, to show you that before thought, before ego, before I am, there is just presence. The problem is not that we are conscious, it is that we mistake consciousness for identity. We cling to it, inflate it, defend it. We say, this is me, and build a life around it. But in Zen, the true self is not the thinker. It is the silence beneath the thought, the awareness without commentary, the stillness before the mind begins. To sit in Zen is to feel the absurdity of asking, who am I? And suddenly laughing, not because you found the answer, but because the question disappears. You are not the story. You are not the watcher. You are what remains when both fall away. Consciousness, in the end, is the problem only if you believe it's you. Zen offers no solution, only a mirror, and when you look, it shatters. Do androids dream? Do androids dream? It is not a question about machines, it is a question about us, about what makes us human in a world where emotions are simulated, memories can be implanted, and identity is a flickering algorithm. It is the aching inquiry that emerges when you look into the eyes of something artificial and feel a flicker of recognition. If they cry like us, think like us, long like us, what separates our pain from their programming? This philosophy is a mirror held up to modern life, asking whether our humanity has become mechanical. We follow routines. We suppress empathy to survive. We scroll past suffering. We consume meaning in data packets and speak in automated phrases. At what point do we become androids ourselves, functioning, performing, but no longer dreaming? To dream, in this sense, is not to sleep. It is to hope, to imagine, to ache. The androids in this question don't just represent machines, they represent the forgotten parts of ourselves, the programmed parts, the obedient parts, and the terrifying, beautiful possibility that something more is still trapped inside, that maybe, even in them, something sacred stirs. This question does not offer comfort. It does not clearly define the border between man and machine. It blurs it, and in that blur, it forces you to ask, if a soul is more than a heartbeat, more than flesh, then what is it? And have we lost it? Or are we just now waking up to the possibility that being human isn't about origin, but about what you choose to feel, and whether, in the end, you dare to dream at all? Eternal recurrence. Eternal recurrence is the question that crushes you or awakens you. It asks, with terrifying simplicity, what if every moment of your life had to be lived again and again and again, forever? Not just the joy, but the shame, not just the triumph, but the unbearable, humiliating mistakes, every breath, every glance, every silence, repeating without end. Would you curse the weight of it, or would you embrace it as your deepest affirmation? This philosophy does not threaten you with hell. It challenges you with eternity. It does not ask you to believe in fate. It demands that you take your choices so seriously that you'd live them again without flinching. It places time in a loop and stares at you through the curve, whispering, can you say yes to this life, not once, but forever? It's not a metaphysical claim. It's an ethical mirror. It forces you to examine the life you're building when no one's watching. If you recoil at the thought of living it again, what does that say? If you would weep at its return, then why keep choosing it? Eternal recurrence isn't about the cosmos, it's about your courage. To affirm it is to become the artist of your existence, to take the ordinary and make it sacred through choice, through intensity, through full-hearted presence. It is the most brutal freedom because it demands that you stop waiting for better. There is no better. There is only this, forever. Would you live it again? Every wound, every kiss, every breath, that answer is your life, whereof one cannot speak, whereof one cannot speak, thereof one must be silent. This is not a call to censorship. It is a confrontation with the limits of language itself. It is the moment you reach for words and find nothing but the trembling of your own breath. There are experiences so vast, so raw, so sacred, that to speak them is to reduce them, to drag them down into the dirt of explanation. This philosophy is not anti-expression. It is reverent silence before what cannot be named. It lives in the space between logic and wonder, in the pause after grief, in the stillness after ecstasy. It's the reason we fumble when trying to describe love, or death, or the divine, not because we are inarticulate, but because these truths live deeper than language can go. The more we say, the more we lose. Words are tools, and tools break when trying to hold the infinite. This silence is not emptiness, it is presence, a sacred boundary where thought must bow, where ego dissolves. It's what remains when all the talking stops, when the questions dissolve into awe. You feel it when standing before a mountain, or staring into a newborn's eyes, or weeping for reasons you don't understand. In this philosophy, silence is not weakness, it is wisdom. It's the humility to admit that not all things can be pinned down and named, that some truths are not meant to be spoken, they are meant to be lived. And when we stop speaking, for just a moment, we might begin to hear what the world has been trying to tell us all along. Absurd solidarity. Absurd solidarity is the quiet brotherhood formed not in shared beliefs, but in shared bewilderment. It is the unspoken bond between those who have looked into the absurd, seen that life has no ultimate meaning, and yet still choose to stand together. This solidarity is not built on hope, it is built on defiance. A defiance not loud or angry, but steady, tender, human. In the face of a world that offers no answers, absurd solidarity does not collapse into despair. It reaches for others. It says, I know this doesn't make sense. I know we are alone. I know the universe is silent. But here, take my hand anyway. This philosophy is not about solving the absurd. It refuses the comfort of illusion. It lives in the tension between a heart that wants meaning and a world that refuses to provide it. And instead of fleeing that tension, it embraces it together. We suffer, we laugh, we rage, not because there's a prize at the end, but because the shared act of living becomes its own kind of grace. Absurd solidarity appears in the smallest moments, a glance between strangers in a hospital waiting room, a worker helping another for no reason but kindness, a friend sitting in silence with you, not offering answers, just presence. It is not built on ideology, it is built on being. There is no God watching, no grand reward coming, but there is us, you, me, standing in the storm, and that, against all logic, becomes enough. In a meaningless world, this fragile, fleeting togetherness becomes the most sacred thing we have. Letters to a Young Poet. Letters to a Young Poet is not advice. It is a whispered plea to live deeper, slower, more honestly. It is the voice of someone who has wandered through solitude and suffering and come back not with answers, but with a softer way of asking. It does not tell you how to become great. It tells you how to become real. It speaks to the part of you that is still tender, still unsure, still aching to know if your voice matters in a world so loud. This philosophy begins with a rejection of the outside, of praise, of criticism, of the need to be seen. It says, do not write for applause. Do not live for approval. Turn inward. Sink into your own depths, even if no one understands you, especially then, because the world will always offer distraction, flattery, instruction, but what it cannot give you is yourself. To create, to love, to grow, you must bear the weight of not knowing. You must live the questions now, not demand certainty, but stay inside the mystery until one day, without realizing it, you've become the answer. The letters are not about poetry. They are about becoming the kind of person whose life becomes a poem. You will be lonely. You will doubt everything, and still, the call remains, to cultivate the quiet, to endure the seasons of silence, to hold your pain like a secret garden. The world doesn't need another genius. It needs someone brave enough to feel, to wait, to live as if every invisible moment matters, because it does. Zarathustra's Midnight. Zarathustra's midnight is the hour when time itself holds its breath. It is not the middle of the night, but the middle of the soul, a moment so silent, so still, that the weight of your entire existence descends upon you like frost. It is when the clocks stop pretending that tomorrow will save you, and you hear a voice, quiet and cruel, whisper, "Everything eternal lies beneath this moment." This is not the darkness that comes with sleep. It is the hour of awakening. It arrives when you are most alone, when masks fall and memory returns in violent clarity. It is the time when your triumphs feel hollow, your regrets blaze, and the roles you play collapse into dust. Midnight does not lie. It shows you what remains when all distractions are stripped away. In Zarathustra's midnight, eternity does not stretch forward. It loops. You are asked to look at your life not as a single line, but as a circle. Would you live this moment again and again, forever? This question doesn't arrive with fireworks. It arrives with stillness, with the quiet terror of being seen by yourself. The hour is sacred because it is merciless. It reveals whether you are becoming what you are or hiding from it, whether you are bearing the burden of freedom or fleeing from its weight. And in that blackness, if you dare not to turn away, something stirs, a fire without warmth. "Ah, yes," whispered through clenched teeth, Zarathustra's midnight is not the end. It is the test, the threshold, the gate through which only the most honest parts of you may pass. Mood of angst. The mood of angst is not fear. It is not anxiety in the way you feel before a test or a breakup or a loss. It is deeper, quieter, more absolute. It is the moment when all the scaffolding of meaning, your job, your relationships, your plans, suddenly seems paper thin, and underneath it there is nothing, no reason, no design, just you and the open, infinite silence of existence. Angst is not panic. It is awareness. It is the soul's response to the realization that the universe does not owe you meaning, that there is no fixed purpose waiting to be discovered, and yet you are here, breathing, choosing, held in a moment that no one asked for and no one can fully explain. This mood doesn't strike like a storm. It drips in slowly, like water through a crack. You feel it while brushing your teeth, while watching strangers laugh, while lying awake, staring at the ceiling. It is the unsettling sensation that life is too vast, too fragile, too strange to make sense, and that somehow you are responsible for making it mean something anyway. In angst, you are not broken. You are exposed. You see the world without filters, and it terrifies you, because now you know there is no script. No one is coming to rescue you. You must choose again and again without knowing why. But in this terrifying freedom lies the possibility of authenticity, of creating, not inheriting, the self. The mood of angst doesn't want to paralyze you. It wants to wake you up, to make you feel how alive and how utterly alone you really are. Notes from Underground. Notes from Underground are not written in ink. They are scratched into the walls of a mind left alone too long. They are the bitter mutterings of a man who has seen too clearly and cannot unsee. He is not asking for your pity. He is not seeking redemption. He is bearing a soul infected by awareness, a soul that knows what freedom is and still chooses misery out of spite, out of fear, out of twisted pride. This philosophy is not romantic. It is raw, corrosive. It tears the curtain off the human condition and shows the contradiction at its core. We want happiness, yet destroy it. We want to be understood, yet hide. We crave meaning, yet mock those who search for it. The underground man is not a villain. He is a mirror. He shows you the part of yourself that recoils from sincerity, that sabotages intimacy, that finds comfort in suffering because at least it's yours. He confesses not to heal, but to haunt. He mocks reason, laughs at utopia, and carves his freedom from the refusal to be fixed. His rebellion is not in action, but in inertia, in saying no when the world demands a yes, in being human and hating it. Notes from Underground are not a guide. They are a warning of what happens when your intelligence outpaces your ability to love, when your isolation curdles into identity, when your pain becomes a throne. He is alone, not because he has to be, but because he cannot bear the vulnerability of being otherwise. And yet, you understand him. That's the terror and the truth. The banality of evil. The banality of evil is the chilling realization that the greatest horrors of history were not carried out by monsters, but by ordinary people doing ordinary jobs, following ordinary orders. It is the truth that evil does not always come with fangs and fire. Sometimes it wears a uniform, sometimes it sits at a desk, sometimes it smiles. This philosophy does not scream, it whispers. It tells you that evil, real evil, is not always born from hatred. It is born from thoughtlessness, from a refusal to ask, to feel, to question. It is what happens when people stop seeing others as people, when obedience becomes easier than empathy, when responsibility is outsourced to authority, and in this quiet machinery, atrocities unfold, not with rage, but with paperwork. You want evil to be dramatic, so you can distance yourself from it. You want villains with clear faces, so you can feel safe. But the banality of evil removes that comfort. It forces you to see how violence can be embedded in systems, how cruelty can be camouflaged in normalcy, a signature on a form, a shrug at suffering, a job done well. And the most terrifying part, anyone can become a part of it. Not through malice, but through silence, through passivity, through the decision to not look too closely, not ask too many questions, not feel too much. The banality of evil is not the scream, it's the absence of it. It is the hollow space where outrage should be, the quiet hallway where humanity forgets itself. And it asks, with brutal honesty, are you still thinking, or have you already gone numb? Before the law stands a man, waiting, not because he must, but because he believes he must. The gate is open, the doorkeeper silent but firm, and still the man waits. He waits for permission, for clarity, for something divine to say, now is your time, but the time never comes, and the law, vast and unreachable, looms like a promise that was never real to begin with. This parable is not about legal systems. It is about the invisible barriers we build within ourselves, the way we internalize authority, hesitation, and doubt until they become our jailers. We spend our lives standing before doors we think we're not allowed to open. We tell ourselves we're not ready, not worthy, not allowed. And so, we wait. We waste. The law becomes a symbol of meaning deferred, of truth always just out of reach, of a voice that never speaks clearly, yet holds absolute power over your choices. And the tragedy is not that the man was denied entrance, it's that he never walked in. This philosophy is a quiet scream, a warning, that obedience can wear the face of patience, that fear can disguise itself as respect, that the greatest prisons are built from hesitation and hope stretched too thin. The doorkeeper says, "This entrance was meant only for you," and it closes, and it is too late, and you wonder how many moments in your life you've stood waiting when you could have stepped forward. The law may be an illusion, but your belief in it gives it teeth, and time does not wait for your courage. Nausea. Nausea is the moment existence becomes too real, when the world, stripped of distraction, reveals itself as terrifyingly arbitrary, absurd, and uninvited. It is not physical sickness, it is metaphysical vertigo. You're in a cafe, watching someone stir their coffee, or walking past a tree, and suddenly it hits you, everything just is. Objects, people, time, they lose their labels, their roles, their meaning, they just exist. And so do you, without reason, without justification, without escape. This philosophy does not try to fix the feeling, it lets it unravel you, because nausea is the collapse of illusion, the soft, horrifying moment when you stop believing the story and start seeing the raw texture of being. You realize that everything you've clung to, your name, your purpose, your beliefs, is invented. You are a body, a breath, a thing among other things, and the universe does not care. But this is not despair, not entirely. It is a kind of awakening, because once the nausea passes, once the dizziness of being for no reason softens, you are left with something strange and sacred. Freedom, not the cheerful kind, not the heroic kind, but the kind that says, nothing is given, so everything is possible. You no longer act because it's expected. You act because you choose. You live not because life makes sense, but because it doesn't. And yet here you are, conscious, trembling, real. Nausea is the moment the curtain falls and nothing stands behind it. Just you and a world that doesn't need you but exists with you anyway. The fall is not a crime. It is the confession that follows. It is the moment after the mask slips, after the pedestal crumbles, after the truth you tried to bury rises and speaks your name. It is not about sin, but about exposure. The fall is when you are seen fully and without mercy, and the story you've told about yourself no longer holds. This philosophy begins not with guilt, but with irony. A man admired for his virtue, his justice, his light, reveals piece by piece that all of it was performance, that his goodness was never pure, that every act of charity was laced with hunger for power, applause, control, and once he sees this, he cannot unsee it. His fall is not physical, it is moral, existential, unrelenting. He tries to own it, he laughs at it, he turns it into philosophy, but underneath there is a haunting, the realization that we all want to believe we are good, but goodness itself may be a lie we use to hide from our darkness. The fall is not into sin, it is into awareness. And yet, in that fall, something honest emerges, something more human than virtue, the courage to stand without illusion, to say, I am broken, and so are you, and still we speak, we try, we touch each other through the cracks. The fall is the moment when innocence dies, not to shame, but to truth, and in that truth you do not rise. You descend deeper into what you are, and strangely, in that descent, you become free. The Grand Inquisitor. The Grand Inquisitor is not a villain, he is a mirror. He is the voice that tells you humanity cannot bear true freedom, that people would rather be safe than saved. He stands before the returned Christ and says, you gave them too much choice, too much truth. You asked them to carry the weight of free will when all they wanted was bread, miracles, and someone to follow. This philosophy burns because it speaks to something terrifyingly real, the desire to be ruled, to be told what to do, to escape the agony of decision. The Inquisitor does not deny the divine, he rejects it, because he has watched humanity crumble under the burden of being free. He has seen people choose suffering, war, hatred, not because they are evil, but because freedom is too heavy and love without force is too fragile. He imprisons Christ not out of cruelty, but out of pity. He believes the people need comfort more than truth. They need illusions, structure, authority, and he will give it to them, even if it means silencing the one who came to set them free. The Grand Inquisitor is the part of you that longs to surrender your will, to trade your truth for certainty, to be told what is good, what is evil, what to believe. He is not outside you, he is within. And the terrifying beauty of this story is that Christ says nothing. He listens. He kisses the Inquisitor and walks away. Freedom remains, but it does not shout. It waits. Always it waits. The birth of tragedy. The birth of tragedy is the moment beauty meets chaos and doesn't turn away. It is the realization that meaning is not born from order, but from the delicate dance between ecstasy and destruction, between what can be explained and what overwhelms. Tragedy in this philosophy is not a failure of life. It is its most honest expression. It shows us that suffering does not cancel out beauty. It deepens it. At the heart of tragedy are two forces, one that seeks harmony, clarity, reason, and one that bursts through boundaries with passion, frenzy, and pain. One speaks in measured tones, the other screams. One builds temples, the other tears them down laughing. And true art, true life, is born when these opposites collide, not when one wins. The birth of tragedy is not about despair. It is about facing the abyss and still creating, still singing, still dancing with tears in your eyes. It's the moment you understand that to be alive is to break and still choose to rise in fragments, not whole but radiant, not in spite of suffering, but because of it. This philosophy says, do not run from the chaos. Do not numb it. Let it speak. Let it rip through the structures you've built to stay safe. Only then will you touch something real, something deeper than comfort, something sacred. In tragedy, you do not find answers. You find presence. You find the trembling beauty of what it means to feel everything and survive it, not untouched, but transformed. Fear and trembling. Fear and trembling is the shudder that runs through your soul when you are called to leap beyond reason, when faith demands what logic forbids. It is not comfort, it is not certainty. It is the raw, unbearable silence between obedience and madness. A father raising a knife over his beloved son, a heart breaking under the weight of a command no one else can hear, a decision so inward, so absolute that the world will never understand it. This philosophy is not about blind belief. It is about the anguish of trusting what cannot be justified. It asks, what if your calling isolates you? What if doing the right thing looks like betrayal, sounds like insanity, feels like ruin? It is not the faith of rituals and creeds. It is the faith that bleeds, the kind that keeps you up at night, shaking alone. To live this way is to walk without a map, to love what you might lose, to obey a voice that offers no proof, only demand. It's the fear of becoming who you must become. The trembling is not weakness, it is reverence. It is standing before the impossible and stepping forward anyway. This is the path of the knight of faith, not a hero of myth, but a quiet, ordinary soul who acts on an inward truth that no one else can validate. No audience, no applause, just the leap. And when you leap, you don't rise, you fall. But in falling, in surrendering to the absurd, something unspeakable is born, the miracle of faith not in what is seen, but in what is felt, deep, terrible, holy. Summer in Algiers. Summer in Algiers is not a place. It is a moment suspended between sunlight and silence, where the world no longer needs to justify itself. It is the raw, golden stillness of a body stretched across the heat of existence, no longer begging for meaning, no longer asking for anything but this. The sea glistens, the skin burns, the breath slows, and for once, it is enough to simply be. This philosophy is not born in temples or books. It is born in sunlight, in salt water, in the slow rhythms of a place untouched by the hunger for eternity. It speaks of a life without metaphysics, without afterlife, without gods, only the immediate and sensual miracle of presence. It does not cry for answers. It listens to the waves. Here, joy is not ecstatic. It is quiet, grounded, mortal. It knows the body will decay. It knows love will fade. And still it chooses to kiss the moment, to lie under the sky like an animal that needs no salvation. This is not denial of suffering. It is the refusal to let suffering define everything. It is rebellion through gentleness. Summer in Algiers is the acceptance of death without despair. It is finding the sacred in simplicity, in the warmth of skin, in the slow curve of the earth meeting the sea. No prayer, no illusion, just the calm dignity of living fully in a world that owes you nothing. And in that humility, in that sunlight, you feel something rare, not hope, not faith, peace, a peace that doesn't demand, that doesn't strive, a peace that simply says, this is enough. So I and mind is the sacred bond between perception and presence, the revelation that to see is not merely to observe, but to participate. This philosophy insists that vision is not passive, it is intimacy. The eye does not record the world like a camera. It reaches into it, touches it, changes it, and in return, the world gazes back. To look is to be vulnerable. When you truly see something, another person, a painting, a landscape, you are no longer separate from it. Your body feels it. Your memory absorbs it. Your silence is filled by it. This is not abstract theory. It is the living, pulsing truth that vision is not a distance, but a contact. The eye does not float above the world. It is inside it. The mind, then, is not a detached ruler of thought. It is a rhythm, a resonance, shaped by what the body sees, hears, touches. We do not think apart from the world. We think through it, through color, gesture, shadow, through flesh and light. The painter knows this. The lover knows this. The child knows this. But we forget. We reduce vision to data, thought to logic, the body to machine. This philosophy demands we remember, that we return to the trembling act of seeing something as it is and letting it undo us, to stand before a work of art, a face, a tree, and feel your separateness dissolve. I and mind together do not conquer the world. They become it. And in that becoming, there is no observer, only presence, only wonder, only the unbearable beauty of being alive and awake. Thus spoke Zarathustra. Thus spoke Zarathustra is not a doctrine. It is a thunderstorm, a hymn, a cry from the depths of a soul that has burned through illusions and dares to speak what others only fear. It is the voice of a prophet who has walked through madness, through solitude, through the death of God, and returned not with despair, but with fire. He does not offer comfort. He calls you to rise. This philosophy tears down every crutch you've ever leaned on. Morality, religion, tradition, even reason itself. It whispers that there are no absolute truths, only the truths you are brave enough to create. You are not a servant. You are not a victim. You are not a passive player in someone else's story. You are the creator, the sculptor, the one who must give birth to meaning in a universe that remains silent. Zarathustra speaks of the Übermensch, not as a tyrant, but as the one who transcends herd thinking, who walks away from safety and dares to affirm life in all its chaos and cruelty, the one who learns to love fate, to say yes to everything, even suffering, even death, and in that yes becomes free. This is not for the timid. To hear Zarathustra is to feel the ground fall away beneath your feet. There are no maps here, only the mountain and the abyss and your will to climb. He does not say, follow me. He says, become yourself, and that is both the heaviest burden and the most sacred gift you will ever carry. Attention as prayer. Attention as prayer is the sacred act of noticing without demand. It is not asking, not speaking, not performing, but simply offering your full, unbroken presence to what is. This philosophy tells us that real prayer begins not with words, but with silence, with the kind of stillness that does not seek to control, but to witness, to attend to something so deeply that it becomes holy through the sheer weight of your gaze. When you give your attention, truly you are saying, this matters, this is enough, this flower, this breath, this voice trembling in grief. You are not asking life to change. You are not bargaining. You are bowing. In attention, the ego dissolves, the future disappears. You are no longer the center. You become the space in which something else can finally speak. This is not mystical fantasy. It is a radical shift of presence. In a world that constantly pulls your focus, that monetizes your distraction, attention becomes resistance. And when given gently, when held without grasping, it becomes reverence. You do not pray by escaping the world. You pray by entering it so fully that even the smallest thing becomes luminous. To attend to someone in pain and not flinch, to notice the light on the wall and say nothing, to breathe and feel the breath all the way through. These are prayers, offered not to a God above, but to the sacred within. And when you give that attention, you do not just honor the world, you remember that you are part of it, not above, not outside, but here entirely. Gelassenheit. Gelassenheit is the silence after striving, the stillness after surrender. It is not indifference, and it is not passivity. It is the deep letting go that occurs when you stop trying to bend the world to your will. In this philosophy, freedom does not come from control. It comes from release, from loosening your grip on certainty, on mastery, on the endless drive to dominate, define, and possess. It is the opposite of modern life's restlessness. While the world demands productivity, clarity, achievement, Gelassenheit waits. It does not rush to fix, to judge, to act. It listens, it watches, it steps back, not out of weakness, but from reverence. It is a quiet strength that allows being to simply be, a sacred attachment that opens the soul to something deeper than thought. This is not resignation, it is openness, a stepping aside of the ego, so that truth, not your truth, but truth itself, can emerge. You do not impose meaning, you let meaning arrive. You do not force answers, you dwell in the question. Gelassenheit is felt most in the spaces where language fails, in a moment of awe before nature, in the hush after heartbreak, in the pause between breath and thought, where you remember you do not own your life, you accompany it. It is not a command, it is an invitation to stop clenching, to stop chasing, to rest, fully awake in the mystery of existence. And in that restful clearing, something arrives, not loud, not obvious, but real, not what you wanted, not what you expected, but what was always there, waiting to be received. Being and nothingness. Being and nothingness is the unbearable truth that you are not a fixed thing, you are a becoming. You are not defined by what you are, but by the space between who you've been and who you have yet to become. In this philosophy, your essence is not predetermined. You exist first, and then you choose. And in that terrifying freedom, everything is up to you. But with that freedom comes the weight of nothingness. Because if nothing defines you except your choices, then you cannot hide behind nature, fate, or excuses. You are condemned to be free. Every action, every silence, every failed attempt to escape responsibility, these become the architecture of your being. You are what you do and what you refuse to do, and you are always, always choosing. This is not empowerment. It is exposure. You stand on a vast, empty stage with no script. The world is not waiting to reveal meaning. You must create it. And when you don't, nothingness seeps in. Not a vacuum, but a mirror, showing you that your avoidance, your self-deception, your roles are all inventions to cover the raw, trembling fact of your freedom. Being and nothingness is not a riddle to solve. It is a condition to endure, a daily confrontation between who you are pretending to be and the nothingness that calls you to authenticity. That says, you are not a thing, you are a project. And whether you accept that or run from it, that too is your choice. There is no escape from this freedom. Only the question, what will you become now that no one is stopping you? The sickness unto death is not physical, it is despair, a silent, gnawing ache of the soul that doesn't kill the body, but corrodes the self from within. It is the unbearable awareness that you are not who you should be and that you cannot seem to become who you truly are. This sickness is not a moment, it is a condition, and the more you try to hide from it, the more it spreads. It takes many forms. Sometimes it is defiant, shouting at the sky, rejecting the self entirely. Sometimes it's quieter, hiding beneath routine, behind a career, within a smile that no longer reaches the eyes. It is the despair of being lost to yourself while pretending you are fine, the despair of knowing you were meant to be more, but being too afraid to reach for it. The sickness unto death is not cured by pleasure or success. It is a fracture in the soul, a disconnect between who you are and who you were meant to be. And what makes it so devastating is that the world rarely notices. Despair can wear a suit. Despair can raise children. Despair can laugh at parties. But deep down, there is a voice whispering, you have abandoned yourself. And yet, this sickness carries its own strange hope, because to feel it is to still care, to still hunger for truth, for meaning, for selfhood. It is the cry of a soul that refuses to die completely. The real danger is not in feeling it, but in numbing it. The sickness unto death is not final, but it must be faced, or it becomes you. The Madman, Aphorism 125. The madman enters the marketplace, lantern in hand, at noon, not seeking light, but truth. He cries out that God is dead, not as blasphemy, but as mourning, not because he hates faith, but because he sees what others refuse to, that we have killed the sacred with our own hands, and no one even noticed. This is not a triumphant declaration. It is a scream that echoes through the hollowness we've tried to fill with distraction, progress, and pride. He is not mad because he is wrong. He is mad because he is early. He sees before the rest what the world has not yet dared to feel, that without the divine, without the absolutes we once leaned on, we are adrift, that we walk among the ruins of meaning, pretending not to notice the silence where a voice once spoke. He asks, how shall we comfort ourselves, the murderers of all murderers? This philosophy is not about theology, it is about consequence. If we have dismantled the heavens, what rises in its place? Science, wealth, identity? None of them answer the deeper ache. The madman knows this. He holds the mirror, and we look away. He is not laughing, he is grieving. And when we scoff, when we call him insane, he does not fight back. He knows he is too soon, that the world will understand only when the echo finally catches up, that the age of disbelief comes not with fire, but with emptiness. And in that emptiness, his lantern still burns, searching, not for God, but for someone who feels the loss. The face of the other is not a concept. It is a demand, a sudden, undeniable confrontation with the fragile, sacred presence of someone who is not you. It is not just seeing a face, it is being seen, exposed, called, interrupted in your comfort, your certainty, your power. The face looks at you, and without words it says, you are responsible for me. This philosophy does not begin in thought, it begins in encounter. In the trembling moment when you realize the other person is not a reflection of your needs, your fears, your desires, but a being with their own infinite depth, their own suffering, their own right to exist without your permission. It is the moment when the illusion of control falls away, and in its place appears something more terrifying, obligation. The face of the other is not always beautiful. It can accuse, it can beg, it can weep, it can stay silent in a way that shatters you. It makes no argument, it demands no reward, it simply is, vulnerable, unrepeatable, irreducible, and that is-ness calls you to respond, not with theory, but with care, with humility, with action. It is easy to build systems, ideas, beliefs. It is harder to sit across from a stranger's suffering and say, I see you, I cannot ignore you. The face calls you out of yourself. It interrupts your freedom. and in doing so reveals a deeper freedom, the freedom to choose responsibility over indifference. To meet the face of the other is to meet the sacred in flesh, and in that gaze, something in you must change, or you were never truly looking. No exit. No exit is the nightmare of self laid bare. Three people locked in a room, stripped of escape, condemned not by fire or chains, but by each other's eyes. Hell, in this philosophy, is not torture, it's exposure. It's being seen endlessly, relentlessly, by others who reflect your shame back at you, like a mirror you can't turn away from. No demons, no flames, just you and the unbearable weight of how others see you. In this room, you cannot lie, not convincingly. Every excuse, every defense, every desperate attempt to control your image unravels beneath the gaze of those who no longer believe you. And slowly, terribly, you begin to realize there is no outside, no exit, not from the room, not from them, not from yourself. This is the philosophy of inescapable selfhood, of a consciousness trapped in a performance, endlessly aware, endlessly judged. You are not punished with pain. You are punished with presence, with permanence, with the exhausting clarity that you are both prisoner and jailer. The others in the room become your torment, not because they hate you, but because they see through you. They know you, and in knowing you, they destroy the lies you tell yourself. You try to run, but there is nowhere to go. You try to justify, but the silence rings louder than your words. And slowly, you come to understand this is not a play. This is your truth. Hell is not elsewhere. Hell is within. Hell is the self, forever exposed, forever observed, forever unresolved. And the door stays shut because you are the lock. Caligula is not just a tyrant. He is the man who dared to take the absurd seriously. He is what happens when someone looks at the universe, sees that it offers no justice, no logic, no meaning, and refuses to lie about it. He demands the impossible, happiness in a world built on death, truth in a world built on silence, and when the world cannot give it, he decides to break it. This philosophy is not about power, it is about clarity corrupted. Caligula begins with grief, with the loss of someone he loved, with the realization that even beauty, even innocence, cannot escape the grave. And from that wound, he begins to unravel, not with madness, but with relentless honesty. If nothing matters, then anything is permitted. If life is meaningless, then why not destroy, dominate, indulge? Caligula becomes the embodiment of absurd logic taken to its darkest conclusion. He does not believe in evil, only in coherence. If death rules everything, why pretend to be kind? Why build when it will all decay? Why love when it will end in loss? He strips the world of its illusions and calls it freedom, but it is a freedom soaked in cruelty. And yet, behind his terror, there is pain, the ache of someone who once believed in meaning and was betrayed by it. Caligula is not a monster by nature. He is what happens when a soul demands justice from a godless universe and receives only silence. He is the mirror held to anyone who has ever asked why and gotten no answer, only the echo of their own rage. Twilight of the Idols. Twilight of the Idols is the hour when the statues crack, when the sacred pedestals crumble, and all the comforting lies we've worshipped begin to rot under the weight of truth. It is not a gentle sunset. It is a shattering, a defiant philosophy that marches through the temples of morality, reason, tradition, and shouts, "These gods are dead, and we killed them with our cowardice." This is not destruction for its own sake. It is liberation. The idols, those inherited beliefs, those hollow virtues, those brittle ideals, are exposed as illusions that weakened us. They taught us to be small, to obey, to turn away from the wild force of life within us. They called suffering noble, humility holy, self-denial divine, and in doing so, they poisoned joy, twisted strength into guilt, and shackled the human spirit. The twilight comes to burn through the fog. It is the moment when deception becomes unbearable, when decadence wears the mask of truth and must be ripped away. It is the beginning of revaluation, a ruthless cleansing of the values that betrayed us, not to descend into chaos, but to clear the path for something fierce, something honest, something that affirms life rather than flees from it. This philosophy does not kneel. It stands, it laughs, it offends, it dares you to stop being tame, to stop calling weakness virtue, to smash the idols in your own heart and see what remains. The twilight is not the end, it is the hour before rebirth, and only those brave enough to destroy their false gods will be free enough to create themselves anew. Either or is not a choice between right and wrong. It is the battlefield between two ways of being, the aesthetic and the ethical. It is the split within you, pulling you in opposite directions, each whispering a different promise. One says, live for beauty, sensation, freedom. The other says, live for meaning, responsibility, truth. Both are seductive, both are real, and neither lets you rest. The aesthetic life is the pursuit of experience, the thrill of romance, art, wit, and escape. It shuns commitment, dreads boredom, and dances on the edge of despair, masking emptiness with elegance. It is the soul terrified of depth, hiding behind irony. The aesthetic self fears that to choose is to lose, and so it avoids choosing at all until the ache of emptiness can no longer be denied. The ethical life is the life of the chooser, the one who says, I will not escape myself, I will become myself. It is not safety, it is not comfort. It is the slow, difficult road of taking your existence seriously. It asks you to stand in the wreckage of your contradictions and build a life that matters, not because it feels good, but because it is yours. Earned, owned, either or is not just a philosophical dilemma. It is the cry of the human condition. We long for freedom, yet crave meaning. We want to be weightless, yet yearn to be rooted. And in the silence between those poles, the soul trembles. You cannot live both lives forever. At some point, you must choose, and in that choice, you become, or you vanish. Existence precedes essence. Existence precedes essence is the terrifying, liberating truth that you are not born with meaning. You create it. There is no divine blueprint, no inner script waiting to be discovered, no cosmic role assigned before you arrive. You simply exist, thrown into the world, raw, unfinished, and only through your choices, your actions, your failures and desires do you become something, anything. This philosophy rejects the comfort of predestination. It tears the idea of fate apart and places the burden, no, the freedom, squarely on your shoulders. You are not a fixed being. You are a project, a becoming, and there is no way to avoid it. Even not choosing is a choice. Even silence speaks. You do not discover who you are. You decide, and this decision is not abstract. It happens in every moment, in every relationship, in every time you say yes when you mean no, or no when you mean yes. The person you are is not hidden deep inside, waiting to be unlocked. It is built painfully with each trembling act of responsibility. But this is not just freedom, it is anguish. Because if you cannot blame your essence, if there is no divine reason you are broken, then you must own your life, all of it. The lies, the longing, the moments you betrayed yourself just to be loved. You made that, and you can unmake it. Existence precedes essence means you are free, radically, brutally, and the only question that remains is what you will do with that freedom now, knowing that no one but you can answer it. The will to power. The will to power is not about domination. It is about creation. It is the primal force pulsing beneath every action, every desire, every breath, the drive not just to survive, but to become, to expand, to shape the world instead of submitting to it. This philosophy is not about crushing others, it's about refusing to be crushed by the weight of life's meaninglessness. It begins with the death of God, not as a doctrine, but as a collapse, the collapse of external meaning, of fixed morality, of inherited truth. And in that void, something must rise, or we fall into nihilism. The will to power is that rising. It is the soul's rebellion against decay, not to restore old values, but to forge new ones, forged in fire, in solitude, in the raw furnace of one's own becoming. This is not the will to pleasure, or comfort, or safety. It is the will to transform, to take suffering and carve strength from it, to take chaos and birth form. It is the artist's urge, the philosopher's madness, the warrior's silence before battle. It does not ask for permission. It does not beg for meaning. It creates it through blood, through thought, through will. But this power is not gentle. It costs you your innocence. It tears away the part of you that wants to be saved, and what remains must choose, not to rule others, but to rule the self, to command your own becoming. The will to power is not a cry for conquest. It is the quiet vow, I will not be small, I will not disappear, I will become what I am. Time and being are not separate. They are the same wound, the same breath, the same silence that stretches across your life like a shadow. This philosophy tells us that to be is to be in time, and to exist in time is to be incomplete, always arriving, always slipping away. You are not a finished self. You are a becoming, a flicker, a moment unfolding and already gone. Being is not a static substance. It is a happening, a presence shaped by absence. And time is not just a line on a clock. It is the horizon that gives being its weight, its urgency, its fragility. You know you are because you know you will not always be. You love because there is not enough time. You speak because the silence is coming. Every heartbeat reminds you that you are passing through. This is not poetry, it is ontology. Your being is not outside of time looking in. It is thrown into time, bound by it, haunted by it. You are not simply here, you are here now, and that now slips, fades, dies, again and again, and still you continue trying to hold on to a self that is always changing, always disappearing. Time and being ask you to stop pretending you are permanent. They ask you to live knowing you are dissolving. They do not offer comfort. They offer truth, that you are not a thing, but a trace, a question. And in that fragility lies your deepest possibility, not to escape time, but to inhabit it, fiercely, fully, before it leaves you behind. The wall is the boundary where thought stops and truth begins. It is the moment when a man, condemned and waiting for death, realizes that all illusions have dissolved and only the raw, physical certainty of his end remains. The wall is not a symbol. It is real, cold, final, and it stares back without pity. This philosophy strips you down. It denies transcendence, afterlife, cosmic justice. It leaves you with a brutal clarity that death is not a passage, it is a wall, unclimbable, unmovable, not to be bargained with, spiritualized or softened. And when you stand before it, naked in your final hours, all the lies you've told yourself begin to fall away. You begin to see the truth of freedom, not as a gift, but as a sentence. You chose and you must answer for it. No God will come to forgive. No one will take your place. Your life was your own. Even in prison, even in chains, you were free to be. And now, in the shadow of the wall, you feel the full weight of that freedom, terrifying and pure. The wall doesn't care what kind of man you were. It doesn't offer redemption or punishment, only silence. But in that silence, something impossible happens. You begin to accept it, not with peace, but with dignity, with a bitter, trembling sort of grace. To face the wall is to face yourself, nothing more, nothing less. And that is the final truth, the only one that cannot be denied. She came to stay. She came to stay is not a love story. It is a war disguised as intimacy. It is the slow, suffocating unraveling of the self when faced with the unbearable closeness of another. This philosophy does not romanticize togetherness. It exposes it. It asks, what happens when someone enters your life so completely that you begin to vanish? She comes, not with violence, but with presence. At first, it feels like devotion, like fascination, but slowly the boundaries blur. Your words become hers. Your moods shift in tandem. Your identity, once sharp and solitary, softens, then melts. The more you cling, the more you lose yourself. And the more you lose yourself, the more you cling. This is not about betrayal. It's about absorption, about how intimacy, when unchecked, becomes erasure. You do not just fall in love, you fall into the other, and sometimes you do not come back. What began as connection mutates into possession. Freedom becomes guilt. Choice becomes performance. Love becomes surveillance. She came to stay is the existential fear of losing yourself in the eyes of another, of becoming a character in someone else's narrative, of waking up one day and realizing the you once knew is gone, quietly replaced by a version sculpted by fear, longing, and the desperate hunger to be needed. This is the philosophy of identity under siege, of the self not shattered but diluted. And in that fading, a brutal question rises. If love costs your autonomy, was it love or surrender? She came to stay, but what did she take with her when she did? Prince Myshkin's suffering. Prince Myshkin's suffering is the sorrow of a man too good for the world he's been born into. His pain is not caused by cruelty, but by purity. He walks through a corrupt, mocking, wounded society with a heart that refuses to harden, a soul that cannot lie. And for this, he is misunderstood, used, ridiculed, not because he fails to love, but because he loves too much. This philosophy is not about naivety. It's about the agony of innocence that persists in a world where innocence is punished. Myshkin sees the brokenness in people and still believes in their goodness. He forgives before he is asked. He listens when others shout. He weeps where others laugh. And it is not weakness. It is unbearable strength. But the world has no place for saints. His compassion confuses people. It exposes them. It makes them see what they've become. And instead of being grateful, they reject him, because it's easier to mock the light than to face your own darkness. Myshkin's suffering is the suffering of someone who refuses to stop feeling, who refuses to become numb. He is crushed not by failure, but by a vision of beauty so intense it breaks him. He sees what could be, how people might live, love, forgive, and it tortures him to watch how far they fall from it. He is not a savior. He does not fix the world. He simply bears witness to it, with eyes unclouded by hatred, and in doing so, becomes a mirror. His suffering is not just his own. It is yours too, the part of you that still hopes, that still aches, that still believes there must be another way. Reflections on the Guillotine. Reflections on the Guillotine is not an argument. It is a cry against the machinery of death disguised as justice. It is the confrontation with a violence so cold, so calculated, that it masquerades as morality. This philosophy stares directly into the eyes of capital punishment and refuses to look away, not with outrage alone, but with sorrow, shame, and a trembling human plea. Do not kill in our name. This is not about crime. It is about finality, about the irreversible silence that comes when a human being, however broken, is reduced to an example. The guillotine is not just a blade, it is a ritual that tells society its most horrifying lie, that by killing, we are purified, that by ending a life, we affirm the sanctity of others. But death does not teach reverence, it teaches fear. This philosophy asks, what kind of world must we build if our sense of justice depends on execution? What does it mean for the human soul to watch, to cheer, to accept? It is not the criminal who is most deformed by the guillotine. It is the citizen who consents to it. The executioner is only the final hand. The true violence lives in the quiet approval of the crowd. Reflections on the guillotine is not a call for leniency. It is a call for dignity, for the refusal to meet cruelty with cruelty. It does not ask whether the condemned deserve death. It asks whether we deserve to give it. And in that question, the blade begins to tremble, not with guilt, but with the weight of a truth we've tried for too long to ignore. The Antichrist. The Antichrist is not a denial of divinity. It is a ruthless demand for honesty. It is the scream of a soul that has seen how morality can be used as a weapon, how compassion can be hollow, how faith can be built not on strength, but on weakness disguised as virtue. It is a philosophy that does not attack Christ, but what was done in his name, the systems, the dogmas, the shame-soaked chains sold as salvation. This is not blasphemy for shock's sake. It is rebellion against spiritual decay, against a culture that teaches you to despise your instincts, fear your desires, and call your suffering holy. It is a rejection of guilt as a virtue, of meekness as sainthood, of a kingdom that glorifies pain while feeding power to those who preach it. The Antichrist calls for a re-evaluation of all values. It dares to ask, what if what we've called good is really life-denying? What if the highest virtue is not obedience, but creation, not humility, but vitality, not sacrifice, but the will to affirm life fully, flesh, chaos, contradiction, and all? This philosophy burns away the false comfort of redemption and in its place offers a terrifying gift, responsibility. No one is coming to save you. No one has written your meaning. You must write it yourself, with blood if necessary. It is not cruelty, it is clarity. The Antichrist wants you to rise, not above others, but above the lies that make you small. It wants you to say yes to the earth, yes to yourself, yes to this life, not because it is easy, but because it is yours. The question concerning technology. The question concerning technology is not about machines. It's about how we see the world when machines shape our vision. It is the quiet, creeping transformation of everything into a resource, everything into a function, everything into something to be used. This philosophy warns us that technology is not neutral. It is a lens, a force that doesn't just change what we do, but how we think, how we feel, how we exist. It begins subtly. A forest becomes lumber, a river becomes hydropower, a person becomes labor. We stop seeing things for what they are and start seeing them for what they can provide. Technology does not ask, "What is this?" It asks, "What can I make of this?" And in that shift, the world loses its mystery, its dignity, its soul. This is not anti-progress. It is a demand for awareness, because when everything is standing reserve, waiting to be extracted, optimized, exploited, we forget that some things are not meant to be touched. Some things are meant to be witnessed, to be honored. And when we lose that reverence, we lose ourselves. The danger is not the machine. The danger is the mindset, a mindset that cannot see beauty without calculating value, that cannot sit in stillness without reaching for a screen, that cannot see the sky without wondering how to harness it. The question concerning technology is a call back to being, to remember that before we build, we belong, that before we use the world, we are of it. And if we forget that, if we let our tools shape our essence, we may one day wake in a world where everything works and nothing matters. Exile and the kingdom exile, and the kingdom is the ache of being caught between belonging and isolation, between the yearning for home and the knowledge that no true home exists, not in this world, not in any. It is the experience of living as a stranger, even in familiar places, of loving people you cannot fully reach, of feeling close to something sacred, but never close enough to touch it. This philosophy does not offer answers. It captures a condition. Exile is not only political, Not only geographical, it is spiritual, existential. You are cast out the moment you become aware, aware of injustice, aware of death, aware of the silence between yourself and others. And yet, the kingdom, the dream of unity, of peace, of meaning, still calls to you. You are suspended between them. Exile sharpens your mind. Kingdom softens your heart. Exile makes you see too clearly. Kingdom makes you feel too much. The more you long to return, the more you understand you cannot. And yet, you keep walking. This tension is what makes you human. It creates the art, the love, the defiance. You build homes even as they collapse. You speak truths even when they alienate you. You reach out even when your hands come back empty. Because within exile lives a kind of truth, and within the kingdom, a kind of hope. You will never fully arrive. You will never fully belong. But in that restless movement, in the aching space between what is and what could be, you become something luminous, not at home in the world, but not lost either, searching and still walking. The transcendence of the ego. The transcendence of the ego is the startling realization that the I you cling to, the voice in your head, the thinker behind your thoughts, is not the center of consciousness, but a construct, a fiction woven from memory, habit, and the desperate need to anchor the storm of experience. This philosophy dismantles the idea that your ego is who you truly are. It says, you are not the one thinking. You are the space in which thought happens. The ego is loud. It claims ownership. It says, I feel, I want, I suffer. It narrates your life like a story it's writing in real time, pretending it's in control. But if you sit still long enough, quietly enough, the illusion begins to dissolve. You begin to see thoughts arise unbidden, feelings surge without your permission. Awareness continues even when the I goes silent. To transcend the ego is not to erase yourself. It is to uncover what exists beneath the mask of identity, a field of presence, a witness, something vast, open, and impersonal. The ego resists this, terrified of disappearing. It demands you stay attached to your story, your reputation, your scars. But transcendence whispers, you are more than that. You are not the contents of your mind. You are the clarity that holds them. This is not mystical fantasy. It is liberation. Because once you see the ego as a tool, not a master, you are no longer enslaved by its cravings, fears, or endless commentary. You are free, not from life, but from illusion. And in that stillness, the real self begins to emerge, not separate, not fixed, but infinite. Ecce homo is not a boast. It is a revelation. A man stands exposed, flawed, defiant, and says, behold me, not as the world demands him to be, but as he truly is, unmasked, unashamed, and unbroken by judgment. This is not ego, it is existential courage, to name yourself fully, with all your contradictions, your scars, your hunger for greatness, and your refusal to kneel and say, I accept myself. This philosophy is not humility, it is the death of false humility, the kind that hides strength, that calls suffering a virtue, that worships the small and the broken as if truth cannot roar. Ecce homo dares, to ask, what if you are not here to be good, but to become what you are, not through obedience, but through fire, through revolt, through radical self-creation. It is a final book, a final gesture, a mirror turned outward, daring others to see what it means to live without apology. It mocks the systems that punished honesty, the morality that crucified joy, the people who flinched from truth because it burned too bright. Why I am so wise, why I am so clever. The voice is ironic, cutting, desperate, and still utterly sincere, because this is not about being right. It's about being whole, to write your life as a work of art, to make your suffering sing, to become so awake that even your madness has rhythm. Ecce homo is not a man, It is a stance, a refusal to flinch from the totality of your being. And in that act of self-beholding, the world trembles or turns away, but you remain. Repetition. Repetition is not doing the same thing twice. It is the sacred return of something that was never fully grasped the first time. It is the longing to relive, not because life is boring, but because it's too vast to understand all at once. This philosophy is not about habit. It is about faith, about the impossible hope that something can be regained, not by looking backward, but by stepping into the same moment with new eyes. We live as if we move forward in a straight line, always toward progress, always toward the new. But repetition challenges that. It says, what if the most profound things can only be found by returning? What if love, truth, selfhood are not discovered in novelty, but rediscovered in the familiar after loss, after change, after collapse? Repetition is not nostalgia. It is not memory. It is a test. To love again after heartbreak, to believe again after disillusionment, to return to the world after it has betrayed you, not as the same person, but as someone who dares to hope again. It is the leap of faith disguised as routine, a miracle clothed in Monday. This is not easy. The first time we feel joy, the second time we remember it, the third time we question it, the fourth we either despair or awaken, because repetition, done fully, breaks through the surface and reveals depth. It invites us to meet life not as repetition of the same, but as the reawakening of what was always trying to reach us. To repeat is to say, I return, not because nothing changed, but because I did. Demons. Demons is the fever dream of a society unraveling from the inside out, a warning disguised as a novel, a scream cloaked in ideology. It is the philosophy of what happens when people lose their grip on truth, and in the void cling to extremes. Rage replaces faith, chaos replaces thought, and ideas, once harmless, metastasize into madness. It is not a tale of villains. It is a tale of desperation dressed as revolution. The demons in this world are not supernatural. They are ideological, fanatical, born not from evil, but from pain that has been ignored for too long. They possess the young, the lost, the angry, those who hunger for meaning so deeply they are willing to destroy anything that threatens it, including themselves. Their rebellion begins as idealism and ends in blood. This philosophy sees how fragile civilization truly is, how thin the wall is between reason and delirium, between community and mob, between freedom and the hunger to dominate in the name of some greater good. These demons wear the masks of justice, of purity, of liberation, but behind them is a hollow core, echoing with envy, fear, and the deep need to matter. And the most haunting part? They are us. We are them. Every time we refuse to listen, every time we reduce others to enemies, every time we turn belief into weapon. Demons is not about politics. It is about the soul, the terrifying truth that when we lose connection to compassion, to complexity, to suffering, we open the door. And once the demons enter, they don't leave quietly. Critique of dialectical reason. Critique of dialectical reason is the rebellion against the illusion that history moves forward like a clean equation, that conflict produces clarity, that opposites resolve neatly, and that freedom is inevitable. This philosophy shatters that hope. It exposes how freedom is crushed not by tyranny alone, but by the internal machinery of human choices, the way we rationalize, excuse, and repeat oppression, even in the name of progress. Dialectical thinking promises that contradictions will lead to synthesis, but this critique asks, what if contradiction leads only to deeper contradiction? What if our so-called freedom is hollow? Freedom to consume, to obey, to play roles assigned to us by systems too massive to see? What if reason itself has been bent to serve the structures it once sought to critique? This is not abstract theory. It is personal. You see it in the worker who defends the company that exploits him, in the lover who repeats the same wounds they swore they'd never inflict, in yourself, when you choose comfort over change and call it wisdom. The critique is not of revolution, it's of what comes after, when power shifts hands but the soul remains chained. This philosophy holds up a mirror and dares you to see your complicity. It doesn't offer escape, it demands accountability. True freedom, it says, is not given, it is forged painfully through self-awareness, through action, through refusal to become the function of a system. There is no automatic salvation, no historic force that will carry you. There is only the moment, the choice, the weight, and what you do with it. Letter on Humanism. Letter on Humanism is not a defense, it is a reckoning. It is a turning away from the humanism that flatters, that soothes, that clings to the illusion that man is the measure of all things. This philosophy does not seek to elevate humanity through slogans or systems. It asks a deeper, darker question. What does it mean to be human when all the meanings have come undone? It challenges the very foundation of modern thought, that reason alone can save us, that progress will redeem us, that man is his own God. It sees how those beliefs, though well-meaning, have exhausted themselves, leaving behind a spiritual homelessness, a technical mastery of the world with no understanding of how to dwell in it. We have become clever, but not wise, productive, but not grounded. This letter does not mourn the death of God. It mourns the forgetting of being. That is the wound. We no longer ask what it means to be. We ask what we can use, what we can make, what we can consume, and in doing so we reduce both the world and ourselves to instruments, measurable, disposable, hollow. To write this letter is to plead, not for a return to old dogmas, but for a deeper listening, to language, to silence, to being itself, not to assert man's dominion, but to recall his place, not above the world, but within it. Humanism, if it is to mean anything, must begin not with man's greatness, but with his humility, with the courage to hear what being speaks, before we speak over it again. Resistance, rebellion, and death. Resistance, rebellion, and death is the final cry of a conscience that refuses to go numb. It is not a call to violence, it is a call to dignity, to say no in a world that demands your silence, to remain human in the face of inhumanity. This philosophy does not believe in utopias. It does not seek to perfect the world. It seeks to protect what is most fragile and most sacred, life, even when that life is bruised, broken, and teetering on the edge of despair. Resistance is the breath you take when fear tells you to stay quiet. It is the trembling hand raised not in aggression, but in defiance of cruelty. It begins with a whisper and becomes a scream. It is not about winning. It is about not surrendering your soul to apathy. Rebellion is deeper. It is the refusal to live as less than fully human, not a desire for chaos, but for justice. A rebellion born from love, for others, for the truth, for a world that could be. It doesn't seek revenge. It seeks remembrance, that even in chains, we are not beasts. And death is the backdrop that gives the other two meaning, the final wall, the inescapable horizon. But this philosophy does not fear death. It fears dying without having stood, without having spoken, without having said, I was here and I did not bow. To resist is to affirm that life, even when stripped of illusion, is still worth defending. To rebel is to give your suffering a voice, and to face death with open eyes is the fiercest act of all. On the use and abuse of history. On the use and abuse of history is a cry against memory that paralyzes instead of empowers. It is the philosophy that history, if misused, becomes a chain, dragging the living backward into reverence, resentment, or repetition. It warns that we are not free if we are only echoes, that to be human is not to worship the past, but to wrestle with it, and sometimes to break away from it entirely. History can nourish. it can inspire, it can ground us in meaning. But when clung to blindly, it suffocates. When we idolize it, we stop creating. When we resent it, we stop understanding. When we cling to it, we stop becoming. This philosophy asks, are you using history to grow or to hide, to see clearly, or to escape the burden of choice? There is a danger in knowing too much of the past without the strength to bear it. To stare endlessly at ruins can make you forget how to build. To analyze endlessly can rot the will. Not all memory is wisdom. Some of it is poison disguised as virtue. Some of it keeps you small. But this is not a call to forget. It is a call to return history to its rightful place, not as a master, but as a tool. Learn from it, yes. Carry it, yes. But carry it like fire, carefully and only as long as it fuels the becoming of something new. You were not born to repeat. You were born to create. Let the past whisper, but never let it command.